Dude, that is awesome. Like you just get dudes to come down, talk, tell their story. Like that is just, I just think it's so cool. Like the amount that you can network. Oh, it's too high.
Yeah, you can speak over.
Okay. The how you can network and get people in like that.
Yeah.
Like when I was listening to that one about the mental sensei, my initial thought was like, how did you find this guy?
Through James. James is an
really?
local MMA fighter, and he's reached out. Man, when the fuck did I think I reached out to him, or one of the two. I'm pretty sure I reached out to him, and I was like, "Hey, man," and I know him because I used to train up there, and I was like, "Hey, man, I'd love to have you on." I reached out to him because I seen he was on this one guy's podcast, and I can't remember the fucking name of it, but I said the name on that podcast.
Yeah.
Go listen to it. He's a cool guy. He's not from here, but he's interviewed quite a bit of people here. And so I listened to Jeremy's. He has 2 of them with Jeremy, who just left, and one with James. And I was like, I listened to it, and I was like, damn, James. It's hard to find people that can talk, that can engage, and then like it's a balance. I've had to learn from it too, not talking over people and letting them speak. So you learn, but he was very good at it. So I was like, hey, man, come on. He was like, I'd love to. Came on. We chopped it up for like 3 hours. This is one of my longest podcasts, dude. I mean, we just kept going and going. It was great. And he was like, man, you got to get this guy named Caleb on. And I was like, yeah, no problem. And so I reached out to his guy, and then, we worked it out. Scheduling is always a hard thing, but we worked it out. And then he came on. And man, I mean, it's just like, I start meeting these people, and then some people I don't like. I see their stuff, and I'll shoot them a DM, and I'm just like, hey, if you ever feel available, some bite, some don't. I'm not angry about it. I get it. Everyone's busy, but the ones who do, it's like I'm really appreciative, because not only am I excited to have expand, have episodes and content for the people who watch, but I get to meet like somebody I would have never have met ever. No. In my life, what I mean? Like we would have never crossed paths probably, but through this we did.
Yeah, that was super cool. I listened to that whole episode. It was really cool to listen, and it was kind of funny too, because a lot of stuff that he was saying, it's not new stuff. It's really not, but it's kind of funny how it's being reintroduced to the population right now.
Yeah, because we even talked about books that were written thousands of years ago, The Art of War. The Marcus Aurelius, his Meditations. And sorry guys, I should have gone on longer with him. It was a very early podcast, one of my earliest podcasts I've done, and I'm kind of a night owl. But so afterwards there was a bunch of stuff I was like, damn, I should have asked that. I have that all the time, but hopefully they'll come back on so we can, because you can never get everything out of one podcast, you know what I mean? But yeah, man, he's not really teaching. He's not reinventing the wheel. But what I feel is, it's like, I know people probably get tired of it because it's crammed in our face so much. And there's so many people saying the same things. David Goggins, all these guys like him and like Caleb that are preaching these things to people. But it's needed, because you just don't listen and retain it. It's like the book Meditations. You don't just read it and then you move on with your life, or some people the Bible, it's something you come back to. Yeah. And if you're feeling a certain way in the last week, you were like, what the hell's wrong with me? I'm acting like a bitch right now. Go and read that shit. And then it'll help you be like, oh, okay. It's almost like a meditation type, you know what I mean? It's kind of funny. That's the title, but it is. It's like soothing, just from reading some passages and going, oh, okay, well, you're upset that your future's not going the way you want. You're upset that this isn't going the way. But hey, this is life. Ride it. Try your hardest. Chill. You know what I mean? And it'll calm you down,
Well, I think the thing about that is it is kind of in our face more, right? But at the same time, is that because of social media? Is that because of the way modern civilization is? And then with that is our modern civilization, we tend to think we're different. We're not much different. When you read Meditations and you're reading how Marcus Aurelius was struggling with the same problems that we have today, like he didn't want to get out of bed. He was having he had a right to himself. Hey, look, you have to get out of bed. Essentially, it's the same problems we have now as modern man. So I think it's good to be reminded that our everyday struggles in life is not that much different.
Do you think that we haven't had those issues in the past, that they're becoming more because of how society's leading to? Or do you think we've always had these issues, but yet we haven't had technology to kind of
put it in our face?
Yeah, put it in our face. You know,
I think that's exactly what it is. I think
because everybody always talks about back in my day. It's like, come on, man. I've met some old dudes that act like some bitches, man. You know what I mean? Like, come on. Like, I'm sure there was issues back then. Guys, you know, that needed the same content we're getting now.
Yeah.
They just didn't have it. And they also didn't have platforms to go on and complain about it either. You know what I mean? That's another thing.
What they had was a local bar.
For sure.
You know, and what they had was their little group inside their small town that they would always meet up with, and that's how they complained about it. Yeah. But it's the same complaints. It really, not much is really
just changed. At a local level, you weren't able to reach 1,000 people.
That's the difference, right? So, but globally, and I can tell you because I've actually kind of been around the world, the everyday person in Kansas City or where I grew up in Baltimore or everyday person in Singapore, they got the same problems.
Right.
Kids are acting wild. I don't know what my kid is going to do. Mm-hmm. I got relationship problems. My government is screwing me over somehow, or I don't trust my government. Mm-hmm. It's all the same thing. But it's just amplified now, I think, by social media.
Yeah, and it's funny because they say that today's kids are just wilding out, bad, crazy. But man, if you look through history, you would watch some movies and documentaries, and there was shit going on back in the day too, man. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but you know, I'm sure in my parents' day and my grandparents' day, they had the same shit. It just wasn't out there so much for you to see. These kids weren't videotaping what they were doing constantly and putting it on Facebook and, you know, where some of it goes viral, but there was shit going on back then too.
So one of my favorite stories is The Outsiders.
Oh yeah,
I love The Outsiders. Yeah. Socius, Greases, you know, Pony
usually
Boy.
Anybody that goes to high school, I think, has to read that book.
Yeah. And that one really, when I read it in like 8th grade, it was very, like, it really spoke to me because where I grew up in South Baltimore, we were like the Greasers. And we were always talking crap against the kids. It was called Ferndale. The kids from Ferndale, because they were like the rich Socius. So it really spoke to me at the time of my life. But if you think about that movie, that book's supposed to take place in 1950s. Those kids were wild. If we forget in the book, I think Pony Boy's like 14 or 15, but yet they're running around. They're like, you know, chasing girls.
They kind of romanticize it.
They do, but it's the same thing our kids are doing.
Yep.
I mean, my oldest son's 20. I got a daughter who lives here in Kansas City. She's 19. I went through watching them do the same thing I did at their age, just with different stuff.
What I can say, kind of what has gotten, I think, worse is guns. That's probably what's gotten worse is younger people getting a hold of guns. Mm-hmm. Back then, even when I was younger, not too many people had guns, you know. And that's not me saying we should start implementing more gun laws and all this shit, because to me, the laws don't work with somebody who's doing something illegal. Yeah. It makes no sense. But that is what's happening. And I believe that's not a thing that can be fixed by law. It has to be fixed by in the home. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing is that homes are getting torn apart right now. Yeah. You know, divorce rates up over 50%. You know, a lot of single mothers out there, no matter what you say about, you know, being a single mother, you have to have a father also in the home. It's that balance. You need that mother's love and upraising. You also need a father's raising and a different type of love. You know what I mean? More of a tough, you know, getting you ready for life. But you learn things from both sides. It's a balance. Everything in life.
There's a lot of literature just on that, and so from listening to like other podcasts like the Jordan Peterson and then reading some of the stuff I've read, the literature on probably the one thing that's affecting our society that they didn't have before was how disconnected we are. Even though we're connected by phones, electronics, we're disconnected by interaction.
Community.
And, we're lacking community. So there's a reason that therapy...
Physical community, right? Because we do have community through technology.
Humans are social animals. We're the greatest survival creature known to this planet ever. And the thing that made us the greatest survival creature was man and woman.
Right.
Those two combined.
Right.
Right. Because you need the mentality of a woman, and for one, they bring life in, but they need a man to help bring life in. So it's a paired bond.
For sure.
And then because they're more connected to the limbic system, and they're more emotional by emotional response to a small creature that they have to care for. Then you have the male who, throughout evolution, he had to protect. And they came together in these tribal communities, and that's how we grew. We're a social creature. We're highly social. And so we need that. And so where I'm going with it is more kids with guns. Arguably, yes. Now, we could take gun and turn it to spear. Right. Could have the same problem.
Yeah. Or knife.
Or knife.
How many guys had knives during the greaser era? Yeah. Everybody had a knife.
Yeah. Johnny killed that kid with a knife, right? So, but the difference is the community that came together and would help bring the young men along. So there is a lot of research, and I did a lot of this research because of one of my old job I had, and we can get into that. Yeah. But by bringing them and giving them their passage of rights and kind of bringing them along, because at puberty, once that testosterone hits, which is the second largest boost of testosterone you're going to get in your system. Your first boost is in utero. Your second boost is at puberty. Once you get that boost of testosterone, because that's what separates men from women, is a chemical that is amongst all male species, is that chemical. So when that chemical comes in, and it's a very powerful chemical, if you don't tame that chemical, if you don't direct that chemical is going to create problems. And so if we don't have communities of men who have, went through their passage, have gone through and tested their mettle, and something we talk about in the Jiu Jitsu world, right, is some of the chillest dudes in the world are they're monsters. Yeah. They're chill because they're not worried about it. They don't have to boast. They don't have to beat their chest, because if we engage, one of us is going to walk away, and it's probably not going to be you. Yeah. Now, I don't want that, right? But it's probably what's going to happen. So if you don't have,
known that you're capable of that's the thing. Is what humbles you.
Yeah. And I think what we're running into is this culture that is, we're separated. We don't have community, and we don't have those men who've been tested, who are then bringing the young men underneath. Right. And so that's where we're running into the problem, I think.
Yeah, because nobody wants to deal with it. I feel like you said, everyone's disconnected. Nobody wants to deal with, nobody wants to help out. Nobody wants to help their neighbor. Nobody wants to, and I'm not ashamed of that either. I'm bad at that too. I barely know any of my neighbors right here. And I've been here for 6-7 years. I know a couple of them, but we're losing that in society, and that's pretty sad. And honestly, it's, technology is a good and bad thing, but the bad side to it is that it's isolating us. Yeah. And that's one thing too, man. I hear a lot of people talking about, I'm introverted. I know a couple of people that say that and swear by that, but I don't see how that's possible. Yeah. Human beings being such tribal and community type people, it's like, well, how long can you be introverted for? I just don't see that lasting. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I've never been an introverted type person.
So concept creep is a real phenomenon where people say something. So I'll use PTSD. So in the world that I came from in the Army, PTSD was a word that was thrown around, especially 2005 timeframe. It started
It used to be shell shock, right?
Yeah, it was shell shock before then. Yeah. And then, so about 2005, the acronym PTSD became a huge thing. And now, and that was, it was associated to combat veterans. Well, now I've got 13-year-olds, I hear them say oh, I got PTSD. I'm like, what? How do you have PTSD? Yeah. Oh, my parents were yelling. No, that may have hurt your feelings a little bit. It may have even scared you. I'm not going to say it didn't scare you. It may not have had some trauma. But there's actually some new research coming out that's showing that the way we're acting with trauma and the way we talk about it you'd almost think that we were not a survival creature.
Yeah. I think the problem is that we're using these terms too loosely.
We are very loosely.
The same with racism, same with PTSD, same with being educated.
Yeah.
Because, you can have a piece of paper from a college, doesn't mean you're educated, or you can have a position of power, doesn't mean you're very educated.
Yep.
And it's sad, man. It's sad that we're throwing these terms around so loosely. And I don't know why. Maybe because of the talking heads throwing it in our face every day on the television. I mean, that's they're using it very loosely now.
I think that is.
People in power are using it very loosely.
Yeah.
These terms. So yeah, it's crazy. Well, we've pretty much we started diving in pretty quick. So we got Joe. Me and you know each other through Healy and Gracie.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where we met. Man, you've been fantastic to train with, man. You've taught me a lot of stuff. I know lately we haven't been able to train very much. My schedule's been kind of weird.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hit and miss when I see you, but it's always a good time when I do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Can you we'll start kind of a backstory,
Okay.
Where'd you grow up, kind of where you're from? You said Baltimore earlier.
Yeah. So that's where I call home
Mm-hmm.
because from age 7 to 17, I spent those 10 years before I joined the Army. Because I spent my 18th birthday in the Army.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, so you were the 17-year-old.
I
In
was.
the Army. Okay.
I was and it's because I grew up in a place called South Baltimore. It's called Brooklyn Park, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
It's 21225 area code, South Baltimore, and so where I grew up was not a good neighborhood. Like legitimately not good.
They have a joke that says Tupac left Baltimore to find a better place in Oakland.
Yeah.
Oakland of all places was better than Baltimore.
And I love Baltimore. I go back there. I got a son that lives about 15 minutes south of where I grew up in a place called Glen Burnie. That's where I met his mother. But the thing that kills me about Baltimore is also like they've accepted their reputation.
Really?
Oh man, you go there,
What's so bad about it?
So the crime is bad.
For sure.
I mean, the crime is bad. And so with that, little things like, so growing up and sitting on the stoop, the front porch stoop, that's what we did. Yeah. You just sat on the stoop and you'd see people walk by and you're like, hey, Mikey, whatever,
So you grew up more in the inner city type deal or like city environment, not really suburb?
Yeah. City environment, not like I wasn't in downtown Baltimore,
right,
like off of Light Street, but where I grew up, it was like city row homes. Their homes were built like 1950s. It was post World War II homes that later just, at one time, because my stepmother, she grew up in the house that we wound up moving into. She showed pictures, 1960s, 70s. It was like a nice little area, but then it just creeped and it got bad. And I mean, we used to walk by. Somebody else is getting evicted or, they're burning a car or someone's getting beat up in the street. Like that was legitimately how I grew up. Yeah. So when I didn't have much future, I was not the best in school and it's because I was bored. School was boring.
Oh yeah. I feel you.
I mean, I got a degree now. I will not say I'm educated, most of my wisdom is just from traveling. Right. So I wasn't good at school. I hated school. I was never going to go to college. And then I grew up in a truck driving family. So my father's a truck driver, my grandfather's a truck driver, my uncle's a truck driver. I mean, everybody's a truck driver. So I figured that's what I was probably going to do.
Yeah.
And then my buddy, Dusty, real good friend of mine, just an amazing human being. But we used to run and do a bunch of terrible things together. Dusty had this thing. He wanted to go become like a special forces guy. And I was like, I didn't know anything about it at the time. I legitimately had no idea because I grew up watching the Gulf War on TV. I was 10 years old. Gulf War was going down and it scared me to death. And I became a teenager. My father was yelling at me one day and he's like, hey, you're undisciplined. You need to do something with your life. And he told me, he's like, you need to join the military. And I was like, I'm never going to join the military. I was like 14. It's like, I'm never going to join the military. It's stupid. It's dumb. War's stupid. We should all just like each other. And then, of course, I'd leave the house and then get into a fight. Like, you have to like each other, but you have to get in a fight. Mm-hmm. So either way, I joined the Army after my friend Dusty got me down to the recruiting. And the recruiter showed me this video. And it's hilarious when I look back on it now, because it was like a Ranger School video. But I was sold, man. I was like, that's so cool. I'm going to go be like an Army Ranger, right? Immediately signed up to go be an Army Ranger. I had no idea what they were.
Really?
Absolutely no idea. Back in like 98, when I first signed up, I didn't leave for basic till 99. I had no idea what Army Rangers were. Nobody knew what Army Rangers were. And there was no war at the time. So I was like, oh, this is going to be easy, man. I'm going to get some cool training. I'm going to get a paycheck.
Yeah. Get
I
some
don't
free
have
school.
Yeah. Back then it was a $40,000 GI Bill. So I did. That's what I did. I joined the Army and not really knowing everything it was going to entail. And I went through the whole Ranger thing. So I did basic training, airborne school.
How was basic training back then compared to what you hear now?
Arguably, I will say it's all relative.
Okay.
It's all relative.
I just heard they kind of got away with a lot more shit back in the day than they do now.
Again,
it was a more harder training from what I've heard.
So walking long distance with pack on your back and somebody yelling at you is always hard.
For sure.
So that's why I say I think it's relative. The kind of push. So where I think some people take it's easier now versus then is one, of course, when we're in the middle of it, it's always hard.
Right.
Right. That's one, right? Like the guy before me.
Because it's their perspective, like we talked about,
The guy before me had the harder Ranger School class.
Right.
But the only thing I could probably say is there has been a push more to, as they say, treat them like humans, which I thought was a weird concept because you should be. I expect. So when I went to basic training, it was underneath that time frame where you watched Full Metal Jacket and you expected the drill sergeant to destroy you verbally.
Yeah.
But even when you watch that movie, he never really put hands on anybody.
No.
I think he slapped somebody once. That was it. But he never really put hands on you.
Sometimes people need to get slapped.
They do. They do. That some people need to
I say that,
feel.
but if somebody slapped my kid, I'd be pretty pissed. So.
Well, that's because that person needs a slap. That's why.
Yeah.
But no, so that's how I grew up. I was anticipating that. And so when I got there and my drill sergeants were like that, they would tear you down like verbally. But it's weird. I kind of expect them. They're like, I'll never forget. They were one day we're doing something. They're like, God damn it, Wertz, you are not too smart, but you're trainable. I took that. That was like the highest compliment in the world. He just told me I'm an idiot, but I took it as a compliment, right? Because it's kind of how I don't know. It's just how you talk. That's how you bring people along. You know?
That's how dudes talk.
Yeah, it's how dudes talk, right?
We all break each other's balls.
So I personally did not think it was that tough. Now, again, everything, devil's in the details, right? So I left for basic training. I was in good shape. So physically, it wasn't that tough. I had a blast on the obstacle courses. I could do an obstacle course like it was nobody's business.
So hold on. Before you got to basic training, what'd you do in high school? Did you do sports or anything like that? Or
So we didn't have a lot of money. My family, so we had one income, father's truck driver, stepmother didn't drive us around a lot to do things. We have 4 kids in the house.
Was your father local or was he over the road?
So he started over road and then he went regional and then he stayed
Yeah, my
local.
brother's a local truck driver.
Yeah. But even then, I mean, he was working 13, 14 hours a day.
Yep.
You know, sometimes I still wouldn't see my father for a week. And that was just because he'd come home and he did mainly nighttime driving. Yeah. So by the time he got home, like, I'm going to bed or what, or he's leaving, I'm going to bed. So I'd still go like a week and not see my dad.
There's a reason behind that. Hopefully we'll hit that topic here down the line, because I was just diving into something like that, explaining how companies keep their employees on the verge of where they have to be quiet in order to get their paycheck. Because, you know, back in the day, they were worried about union strikes.
Yeah.
So how they make it to where is they keep that labor wage at a certain amount.
Yeah.
So that way it's not enough for them to strike and demand more, but it's just enough to where it gets them by. And it's just enough to where if they thought about it, they would lose, their personal possessions, their car, their house, and stuff. So they're right on the line. And that's been talked about. I can't remember that guy's name. I didn't write it down. I think his name was like Michael Hudson or something like that. He's actually a professor here in Missouri, University of Missouri. And he explains how all that works, man. I was actually watching a whole documentary on him last night. I'll have to send you that. And he explains there's another guy, something Greenspan. I can't remember his name. And he was the one that's actually talked about it, how companies will do that. And then, so going back to that, your father had to be gone a lot in order to give you guys the things that he could. He had to be absent from your life in order to get that. And then that's where when people start complaining about, our kids are going wild. And about, well, fuck, it's hard out here. And these parents are gone.
Yeah, they're gone.
And they're trying to work and they can't be at both. You know what I mean? Like it's already hard enough right now. You have to work. Literally a majority of households have to have 2 incomes right now. Me, myself included. I couldn't make it without my wife's income and she couldn't make it without mine. And I think that is not right. But, I'm sure people will debate me on that, whatever. But yeah, man. So then what do you get? You get these, kids that just running wild out there because there's no adult supervision and you can't rely on schools, on daycares or these sports programs. They're there to do a specific job, but you are the first line of educating and building your children up. And people are forgetting that.
Well, I don't think you should rely.
They're forgetting and they're not able to. Yeah. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Both. That's a horrible combination. But what were you saying?
You shouldn't rely on those institutions to raise your children.
No, not at all.
Those are your children, right? And and sadly, I think because of the way the way it's going, right, with the more absentee. Because let me go back. My brain just went super fast.
No, you're good.
So arguably, you could say, again, let's go back to like in evolutionary terms. Arguably, you could say men were not always home. They weren't.
Right.
They were going off the fall hunt, right? So they'd be gone for like a month hunting, bringing stuff back. Going off to war. So a lot of them have like the spring summer campaign, and that war was fought by the seasons. So you'd have the spring summer campaign, and they were gone for months, and then they come back, and some of the fathers want to come back. However, the difference was the community that was there. That was the difference. Right. And that, I think, is what we're missing.
When they were gone, the others would step in.
Exactly.
To that role.
Yeah. You would have the elder men in the community who could still kind of say, hey, come here, boy. Yeah.
You'd have uncles or grandparents or aunts, like even if the men were gone, you still had, or these elderly people, your grandfather. Yep. Nowadays, you only see your grandparents on holidays.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's coming from personal, from my life, like I only see my grandma on holidays and, cause we're all kind of disconnected. Even when I do give a call, like, hey, if you need anything, I can be right over, and maybe I should make more of an effort. I should.
Yeah.
But it's like, we're not doing the Sunday dinners or the once a month getting together at families. Like, we're all so caught up in our own lives right now. And I don't think it's just a mix of us doing it intentionally. I think it's a combination of things, work, life, how you're raised, all that stuff.
Yeah. No, and I agree with all that, because I really think that that's some of what's happening, right? Mm-hmm. So we can make the argument that parents are gone and they're failing to be home, and we do this giant systemic thing. But I honestly think sometimes, I really think about this stuff sometimes. I honestly think it's the lack of community. Mm-hmm. It's the lack of community. So that's going back to just that. Like, it's really that.
There's that, John has that little scroll on the wall right there before we change in the changing station back there. And it's by like Gaddafi, who is granted a fucking creep, but what it says on there, if you look past who wrote it or who said it, whatever it is, it has a list of things on there. It's like, we've never been had the most opportunity to get like good medicine. Like our medical field, medicine wise, is really good. We're living longer and all that, but yet we're the most unhealthiest. Yeah. Our obese rate is 70 something % in America. people are relying too much on pharmaceutical drugs to fix it and end all be all, when really exercise and dieting are a big portion of it. It says that we're the most connected to each other through technology, the most connected.
Yeah.
You know, I can call my mother right now on FaceTime and talk to her, but yet we're the most like divided and separated. It doesn't make any sense.
No,
you know, it's like, what is causing that? You know, and I don't know. I really don't. Like I said, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I don't think there's one answer to it.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of happening. We tend to go through cycles, you know, and humans.
You think life's just getting too easy, so we're not having to rely on our family? Like, I feel like when it was harder back in the day, families weren't important. A lot of guys who are from different countries. You know, I've got, buddies of mine that their parents are from Mexico. Yeah. They come up here and I'm like, why are your guys' families so connected?
Yeah.
Because my family, my father's Mexican. His mother is from La Paz, Baja California. And so she's kind of the closest we have to there. But as generations went on, because I remember growing up, it was close.
Yeah.
They kept it real close because I think that's how they grew up. But then it got disconnected as time went on. And what he explained to me, he's like, you had to rely on family and where we come from, or where his parents come from. It's hard, and you needed your brother and your sister and your uncle and your aunt and your grandparents in order to survive. And right now it's so easy, you don't.
I think it's what do they call that? Where you get so successful that there's trying to think of the word right now. It's almost like a negative effect of success, right? Mm-hmm. So you get the United States has been the most successful country the world has ever seen economically. Right. I mean, power, like militarily, we are beyond successful on a historic stage. Nobody's ever touched us.
Right.
With that, though, the technology, because we've created a massive amount of technology that now I don't need to walk to my backyard to find my food and then go hunt once a year to try to get enough food to go throughout the winter time. I don't have to prep for winter. Yeah. I don't need 4 or 5 of my buddies to help me pull a bull, that I just killed.
You're not chopping wood out there trying to stay warm in your house. Yeah.
I could put it on the 4-wheeler because I worked 80 hours last week. I've been grinding all year. I'm making $150,000 a year. I was able to afford a $10,000 4-wheeler, $2,000 rifle, bought the ammo for it. I can hunt that bull myself, take the 4-wheeler, pull it out, skin it. There you go. That if I wanted, or I don't have to do any of that. I can DoorDash somebody else to bring me my food, and I don't even have to leave the house. Yep. So it's the negative effect of success that we're running into. I think we are going to see, because humans run in cycles, we're going to go through a cycle, and then things are going to change, and we're going to go back, and you're going to see a little community kind of build again. But I think it's the negative effect of our success.
It's the saying that's been going around a lot. I think I don't know if Joe Rogan kind of made it popular. Maybe it's always been around, but the hard times create hard men. Yep. Hard men create soft times. Yep. Soft times create soft men.
Yeah, hard men.
Reverse.
Yeah, it's like hard men create easy times. Easy times create soft men. Soft men create hard times, and
we're kind of in that last cycle.
Yeah, I think so.
Comes back, which is scary.
It is,
especially if you got kids, man. It's very scary because we're not going to be around forever. And they're going to have to try to be on their own. You know what I mean? And that's scary. Maybe I don't know how much we're different in age, but I'll be 32 this month. Maybe I'll see it. Maybe you'll see it. I don't know. Or maybe our kids will have to go through it. But yeah, it's a scary thing, man.
Yeah.
Very scary.
Yeah. I'll be 43 in July. So we're only about 11 years old.
Yeah. We're not far.
So probably see it together. But at the same time, I don't know. And maybe it's because I'm even despite given what I did in the Army for so long, I'm an optimistic person. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's also
kind of have to be in this day of world because everybody attaches so much to the negative, and me myself included. I find myself in ruts where I'm just like, fuck, everything's fucked. Who cares? Like this is all fucked, But if you live that way, it's just a depressing life, man.
Oh, it's
and you're not contributing at all.
Yeah. No.
You know, but I've been there.
I think the reason I'm quite optimistic is I've seen enough in other places to be very appreciative of what I have. Right. And I've tried to pass that on to my children. But where I really, we'll see. And here's kind of like my take on it. Most of the movies in the 1980s and 1990s, I'll use Demolition Man as a great example.
Great movie.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah.
We thought that by the year I think it was like 2010.
You were going to be wiping your ass with seashells?
Oh, absolutely. I still don't know how. They actually have like a thing. You can Google like how the seashells are supposed to work. Nobody knew it. It was supposed to be like a joke in there. Yeah. But now people are like, oh, no, this is how it would probably work kind of thing. Oh, my God. Yeah, dude. It's funny.
Somebody's out there recommending it too. Like, don't use toilet paper. Use
I guarantee
seashells.
I guarantee you.
Oh, my God. No, I like when he just cusses into the little box.
And that's how he got his toilet paper.
Tissue.
And I remember, they're not even like big cuss words. He's saying like damn, shit,
ass, and just like spitting out tickets.
Stuff that's on like PG movies now, you know?
Oh, I know, man.
I mean, Disney, Chris Pratt just dropped the F-bomb in the Disney movie for Guardians of the Galaxy 3. He dropped the first F-bomb.
Yeah, and that's a PG-13, right?
Yeah. So now that's it. F-bombs are now okay. Disney movie.
Oh.
No, but I think so. What I'm my brain was getting to is we thought that by the year 2000 we were going to be screwed. Land masses destroyed, deserts everywhere, scavenging for water. You know, just.
Well, you remember that time, right? My parents were scared.
Oh yeah,
2000, the blackout.
Yeah.
Oh fuck, man.
Yeah, I was in the Army at the time.
Oh yeah.
But we were always prepping for something, but. So that was 23 years ago. We were supposed to be like apocalyptic, you know. Mm-hmm. What is the Escape from New York kind of scenarios? These Omega Man, these were all the things, you know. Logan's Run was supposed to take place in the early 2000s.
Right.
No, I mean now we've advanced to where we get DoorDash food brought to us, right? So I think that we tend to, just by our nature of being humans, always look for the worst because. Well, that's how you survive.
Well, I think in history, too. I mean, how long do civilizations go on for? What do they say, 200-something years or something like that? A civilization has gone on without or has, what did they say? They said something about a nation. The longest running nation was like 200-something years. That's what I've heard.
Oh, no, it's got to be more than that. I mean, the Roman Empire ran for about 1,000.
For sure, but I think they were talking about a civilization similar to I don't know how
to us.
I'd have to look that up again, though.
Yeah,
I'm not going to sit here and act like I know what I'm saying. Yeah. I might be wrong on that, but there was a mark. It was 200 and something years. I've heard it before, but it may not be the way I'm using it. So I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it's fair enough because I know the Roman Empire was about 1,000 years
for sure.
The Greeks. They weren't 1,000 years, but theirs was very interesting because they had the states and all that stuff. And then the Brits, I mean, the British, they were like another 1,000 years almost. Like when you look at when they first started and then all the little wars and everything and how later they came together.
Maybe they meant closer to civilization similar to ours.
I think it might be something like that because then you look at, you know, what the British Empire had like their height. That was only a couple hundred years. Exactly. And then they did wind up falling. But again, their fall wasn't like streets on fire. Like there was an economic fall, absolutely, and some people died, but it was nothing near as bad as what communism did.
Right.
When communism was trying to
genocide.
Grow. Yeah, exactly. You know. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty optimistic that we'll sort it out. I think we'll be okay.
So going back to your father being a trucker. You said you did play sports, or you guys didn't have enough money to
no money, no time,
streets, huh? Just doing the old playing with friends out in the neighborhood and all that.
So I did that, but interestingly, because we didn't have money and I wanted things, I actually started working.
Oh,
I would find jobs. My first job, I was 11 years old, being a bus boy.
Yeah, I was 15 when I first started.
Yeah, I was washing dishes in the back of a sub shop, and then make $10 a day for a 10-year-old, man. And, you know, like 91, that was a lot of money. I was making like $50 a week. So I bought all my own clothes. By the time I hit 7th grade, I bought all my own clothes for school. And then I continuously pretty much had a job. I'd babysit kids. I delivered newspapers. I tried to sell windows door to door. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, hey, we got free, you know, we'll do free estimates on your window, whatever. I worked a sub shop for a few years called Boardwalk Fries. I actually worked, that was my longest one. But I've done all kinds of retail, cashier. I was like the worst cashier ever. Like, it was a place called Value City. And the old ladies would come in and they get all these cheap clothes, and I just line them up and tag, ding, 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 fold, put over. I was the fastest cashier, but the old ladies hated it because I just folded it in half, throw it in their bag. I was so, they hated it. But my line was never long. But yeah, so I did not have time to do sports, but what I did was I was always out, was always running around with my friends. My friends and I were always getting in some sort of trouble, or we're getting into fights with people. And then I did a lot of weightlifting in high school. Like, when you grew up in the 80s, Schwarzenegger, Stallone. Yeah. That was it.
Rocky.
That's all you wanted to do. So that's what I did. I just worked out. So in high school, my last year, I only did like one class. I did like marketing class, gym, and then I left for work because I had enough credits that I could leave. So I did like 2 classes, and I went to work.
I think even with like me and yours, like, it's not a huge age gap, but even with our age gap, I kind of seen the tail end of the going outside playing till the street lights came on. But as I got older, the video games, you know, they were out, but you know, when PlayStation 1 dropped, it was like, what the fuck? Like, that was a whole nother, you know, Nintendo was awesome.
Yeah.
You know, Mortal Kombat, all that shit, Mario, great. But when PlayStation dropped, it was like, you know, kids weren't leaving their room, you know what I mean? And they weren't leaving their room when Nintendo came out, you know? So when PlayStation dropped, I remember my parents got me and my brothers one, best day of my life. And we got Madden, I think it was Madden 98 or something like that. Yeah. And that's kind of when I started seeing, I was born in 92, and I seen like it shifting. I didn't notice it when I was a kid, but now looking back, it's like, well, we were outside all the time. And I think it probably depended, you know, what type of family you grew up in. We didn't have a whole lot of money when I was younger.
Yeah.
My parents were really young. They gave us everything they could. And so I kind of see a difference. I've got 4 brothers. They have a little bit different life. My youngest is a senior in high school, and he has a little bit different life than what I had. But like, he doesn't know anything at all about being outside and playing till dark and playing tag and all these, you know, like with neighborhood kids. But like, and then I noticed too, when I moved, because we lived in the inner city until like around like mid elementary, somewhere around there. And my parents moved us up north when they just knew. I mean, you know where that's going. My father was raised down there. He knew what it was about. As soon as they got a little bit of money and they saved up, they got us the fuck out of there. So going up there was like a whole different lifestyle, because the suburbs where we were living, there wasn't a whole lot of kids. I mean, there was kids, but it was more disconnected. You know what I mean? People had a little bit more money, you stay inside, play video games. So we still played a lot outside. Yeah. But then like when I hit like high school, I mean, there was like, you rarely seen kids outside because they were all just playing games. And by then I was already working and stuff like that. But I just noticed it watching my younger brothers, just seeing it slowly taper off. You know what I mean? So I caught the very tail end of that. And now with my children, I have to boot her outside. Like, give me that phone, dude. Leave your phone here. Go outside, you know, at least go walk around with your friends, you know. And there's actually quite a handful of kids out here, but they don't go outside, you know. So it's sad, man.
I think it's interesting what you said. Like, so you were down in the inner city, and then your family moved to the suburbs. Is in the city that you kind of had that like group, you go outside.
Dude, it was an adventure down there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying I don't recommend it, but living down there, you know what I mean? But I mean, there's not all bad people down there. You know, there's a lot of great people down there, just unfortunately can't get enough money to move up to a better neighborhood. And I had a lot of good times down there, man.
No, so why I find that so interesting, because I was talking to a buddy of mine about this before, because he grew up at like South Chicago. He was very Italian. He was from a regular like Italian, and we were talking about that the similarity between Chicago and Baltimore, right? And one of the things that we both talked about was how in those neighborhoods, you say less socioeconomic, you call it ghetto, whatever you want to call it, whatever word we want to use. There was a community feeling though, because I can tell you, I remember. Okay, there might be a fight across the street and everybody knew and you were going there. And then once the fight was done, I was going over to Miss Carla Recipco, the little Italian lady who lived right next door to us, and she'd be sitting on her porch. Nicest old lady in the world. Her family came from Sicily. She told us all the time. She made the greatest meatballs ever, and she would just bring us in the house. I get done Miss Recipco's house, and I was going over to my buddy Cisco's house. You know, Cisco's family came from Spain. Like that's where they came from. So you got all of this, like everybody knew everybody. And even though kids were like running around doing stupid stuff and there were fights and there's, you know, all kinds of horrible things going on, at the same time, there's like this community where like once we hit the suburbs, like, you know, I feel fairly blessed in life. I've been able to get to a point that I can give my family a very nice life.
Right.
And we live very, very comfortable compared. Like I look at the way I live now, I'm like, man, you rich. Like
sometimes that can come out of cost though, right?
You probably
see that in your kids
because they don't go out. It's the same thing, right? So sometimes it's weird when you have trials and tribulations, but yet you get friendship and bonds out of it. That's the payoff.
The problem is we don't want our kids to have to go through that to get that type of character, you know?
Yes.
And really, we probably should. We shelter them a little too much, and then we're contributing to the problem. You know?
Yeah. Actually, my wife and I, Julie, we were talking about this with our oldest when she was becoming a teenager. Right. And I forget, we just moved into this like McMansion in Tennessee. It's a beautiful house. We had it built. Like, holy cow, kid from Brooklyn, you know, bad neighborhood. All of a sudden, I'm having a really nice house built. Tennessee's really awesome. Sold it, made a little bit of money. But she was complaining about something, and I almost lost it. But then I had to remember, it's actually not her fault. She doesn't know anything different because her mother, Julie, came from Florida, and her family did not have a lot of money either. So I got a poor country girl, poor city guy. They got together. We both came together pretty good with our finances, both successful people. And all of a sudden our kids, we're like, well, we want to live in a nice neighborhood. We want to do this. We don't want to live the way we live.
Enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Yeah. Well, our children also got the chance to enjoy them.
Yeah.
Well, they never had a chance to suffer. So all of a sudden, I remember almost losing it. It was something stupid. She was like, I think the hot water was out. I'm making stuff up, but it was something minuscule, and I almost lost it. And then I was like, you know what? It's not your fault. You don't know.
But that's good that you checked yourself on that.
Yeah.
I don't know. How old were you when you had your first kid?
Oh, my very first. Okay. So that's a interesting one. So back a little bit of a story. So my very first kid, his name was Ian, and he was born, I was 20. But then he passed shortly after he was born. So he would be turning 20, man, how old? 23 this year. My next oldest is my son Caleb, and he is turning, because he's 20, so he'll be turning 21 this year. He's 22 years younger than me. So I was only 20 when I had my first, and I was 22 when I had my second. So,
are you okay to talk about what happened?
Oh yeah,
with your first?
I'm fine with it. Yeah. So it was very interesting. So very young, got married very young. And it's because, again, this is what I watched my family do, right? So fell in love with a girl from high school, and I left for the Army. I kind of like a movie story, right? Yeah. Left for the Army, came back, we got engaged. Next thing you know, I had to do a bunch of training. I had to get certified to be a Ranger. Well, certified is the wrong word. I had to go through all the training to become an Army Ranger. And now next thing you know, I'm in Ranger Battalion. So I'm in the Special Operations community, and said, hey, let's get married. She said, cool. So we got married. I had like just turned 18 years old, getting married. She had just turned 19. Mm-hmm. No, she had just turned 18 also. She was only a couple months older than me. She had just turned 18. It's something like that. We got married in 2000. So I was fixing to turn 19. That's what it was. She had just turned 19. I was still 18, fixing to turn 19. Mm-hmm. That's what it was. And so go through all this, and then I had to leave for a bunch of training. Well, next thing I know, I left for training. I left for Ranger school. 2 months after we got married, I went to Ranger school. Mm-hmm. And I was gone from October of 2000. I came back in February 2001. And you want to talk about cold? Ranger school in the winter in the mountains of Georgia. Ridiculously cold time.
Yeah, you're saying that because right now we're doing this podcast and it's cold as shit in my basement. I was like, "Are you going to be all right, man?"
I'll be just fine.
I'm like, "Yeah, you probably been through some cold shit in your life."
I've been a little cold, and then after that, we found out she was pregnant. Because what happens when soldiers get back from the field?
Oh yeah,
somebody's getting pregnant.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So she's pregnant, and then 9/11 happened.
Oh shit.
She was. Because kids are what, 9 months. So she was 7 months pregnant when 9/11 happened. And I knew it. Like everybody was calling me that day. Like I was supposed to go into work that day. We were actually supposed to go to the field. We were supposed to go do a jump that night. Do a long movement, attack, notional enemy base and all that. So
you were a Ranger at this time?
I was a Ranger at the time. Yeah. Okay. We'll get to it. Just, this all plays into my son Ian and everything. So she was pregnant. Everybody's calling me. I was watching the news like crazy. Now, she and I didn't have a lot of money. I had a little 13-inch TV. Mm-hmm. We were living Army housing at the time. Fresh, new married. We were sleeping on a, one of those things, sofa couch thing.
Mm-hmm. Like a futon?
Futon. Yeah. There you go. We're sleeping on a futon all day. Well, I get back into work like the next day because when I got into work that day, I was at 3rd Ranger Battalion, so 375. So if anybody's watching this, they might know it. So I was in 375 at the time, Charlie Company. Got into work. They told us all go home. Like everything stopped. We're not jumping. Airplanes are down. You guys get back. And they locked all Army bases down at the time. So at the time, Army bases were open. You could go on an Army base. It didn't matter. But then they locked it. Like traffic, dudes couldn't get into work. So they locked it all down. Next day, we all had to go into work. Fair enough. We actually went to the field. So 9/11 just happened. And like 2 days later, we went to the field. We did a huge training thing. And I was a specialist at the time. So I had my Ranger tab. We go to the field. I was a team leader. And come out of the field. And then all of a sudden, they're like, hey, guys, we are going to war. We knew we were going to go to war. Like, that was it.
And at the time, it had been a minute since anything.
It had been about 10 years.
The Gulf
War. Yeah. 10 years. In between that, you had Somalia, which is actually 375 also. Right. Rangers in Somalia. So if you ever watched Black Hawk Down.
Oh, yeah. Black Hawk Down. Yeah.
But that wasn't a war. That was a small, skirmish, essentially. So we knew we were going. And we knew our battalion was going to go. And so, I had all kinds of people calling me. So either way, she's pregnant. Well, when we left, so it took about a month or so, and we got pulled up on the aircraft. And we started training before then. We were getting intel of where we were going to go, what we were going to do, all this stuff. And so we left. The morning I had to go to work and essentially tell her, hey, I don't know when I'm coming back. This is for real now. She got on the road 8 months pregnant, and she drove from Fort Benning, Georgia to Baltimore, Maryland, Glen Burnie, Maryland, where her family was. So she's 8 months pregnant. Everybody knew. I was ecstatic. I'm going to be a father. Everybody knew. Like I was like such a nerd back then. I took like a Ranger tab, a Ranger scroll. I sewed it on onesies. Like I was all up in a Kool-Aid. I was going to be a dad. Well, so when we left, we went to a staging area in the Middle East, and it's really cool. It's a little island, and that's where we had to stage before we jumped into Afghanistan. So I was with the initial invasion. This is how it gets to Ian. I'm telling you, I'm getting Ian. Yeah. So we left. We're at the staging area, and about a week after we left, because we left early October, mid-October. We left. A week later, we jumped to initiate the invasion of Afghanistan. So I was with the first about 200 guys to jump in Afghanistan and help to initiate the actual war. It's called Operation Rhino. So if you look it up, it's not like it was anything huge. It was more, it's not like we had giant firefights at the time. It was the initial entry into Afghanistan. We jumped in, we secured the base that would later become Camp Rhino for the Marines.
The one I watched, there was actually quite a bit of fatalities. I watched it last night. I can't remember what the operation was called, but they actually had like 10 or 15 guys pass away during that battle. I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about.
I mean, there's a lot.
They were all Marines, I think.
Oh, Marines.
Yeah,
okay.
They were all Marines.
Well, I mean, it had been. So
they said it was one of the first ones
in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
yeah. I saw.
Maybe it was Iraq. I might be wrong on that. It might be Iraq.
So it gets real cloudy, right?
Yeah.
That time frame is super cloudy. Yeah. I know the Marines did take some. So we cleared Rhino for the Marines, and then later the Marines had to go back in. But by the nature of the Afghans, they'll come right back. So they had to do some fighting to go take it back. But we had cleared Rhino for them. Well, after that, we got moved off to. We actually got moved off to an airfield. In Pakistan. So then we got moved to Pakistan for an airfield, had to do some security there. And I was the morning I came off of security of the airfield, I was just a dude out in like a tower. It's actually like a pit in the ground pulling security. My first sergeant came in and he's like, "Hey, Specialist Wertz, your wife just gave birth." I was like, "Oh man," I was so excited. And then he goes, "But," and that dude, you want to talk about like your gut?
Yeah, like you're riding on a roller coaster, your stomach just drops.
So a week ago, we just jumped to Afghanistan. We're like superstars of the Army because we had the first combat jump since Panama in 1989. And then we're the first guys to help initiate a war in 10 years. Charlie Company 375, well, all 375, we are like the dudes. General Tommy Franks came out, saw us, all kinds of stuff. So we're high on, all the stuff, serotonin. We're the dudes on the block.
Yeah.
But then 2 weeks later, hey, your wife is in the hospital. There's problems with the child. And I just was like, mentally, it's like, man, I need to get back. I kept saying I need to get back. So my platoon sergeant, my first sergeant, they were like, "Look, man, we don't know if we can get you back. Like, we're at war now." And I was like, "You kidding me?" So I did. I went to the chaplain, and I was like, "Sir, I need to talk to my she was my wife at the time. She was my ex-wife." So I was like, "Hey, I need to talk to her." What he did was he took me over to the Delta Force compound, let me use legitimately this. I thought it was funny, the black phone. They had and this is 2001. There was no cell phones then, but they had communication back to the rear. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know how it all went down. I was, again, 20 years old, Middle East, had no idea. But I was able to talk to her hospital room directly. Got a chance to talk to her. She told me, "Hey, something's wrong with the baby. We don't know. The heart's problem." I was like, "Okay, fine." Well, that night, legitimately, and again, I put this back into context. It was only 22 years ago, right? Something like that, going on 23 years ago. How much technology's changed.
Yeah.
In a quarter century, how much technology's changed. Because back then, we were writing letters. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have computers in the field with us.
You had to hope somebody picked up the house phone.
Yeah. So a mail bird had come in that night to drop off mail. Nobody knew it was coming. They're like, "Wertz, get on that airplane. You're going to go back in Afghanistan, but you're going to be out of here tonight."
How long before that letter hit you?
No. I got message immediately. It was a Red Cross. It was a Red Cross. So it took the better part of about 12, 13 hours, which was fast for them. It wasn't like a text message now. That was super fast.
That sucks. I mean, your ex-wife was sitting there 12 to 13 hours having to deal with that, and you had no idea.
No idea.
Yeah, that's
no
sucks.
idea, man. And back then you used to go to the field I'm going to use some Army jargon here. So for those watching, the field is when you go to the woods, right? Mm-hmm. And so you go to a training exercise. Like now, dudes have got cell phones on them and they're texting their wife or significant, whatever, instantaneous. We used to go and we wouldn't hear from anybody for a week. So if the kid ran away, I didn't know. Yeah. If something broke, like the refrigerator, I had no clue until I came home.
One was in the hospital, you wouldn't even know.
Yeah, it had to go through the official channel of Red Cross to come to us.
So but back then, you probably didn't think anything of it.
Nope.
Because you weren't privy to this.
No.
Imagine going back now and these guys not allowing to have their cell phones on the field. They'd probably freak out.
So they're
used to that.
I've got some examples of that. I can give you some real world example. But so next thing you know, I fly back to Afghanistan. We did a pamphlet drop. I actually was in Bagram for like a night, got back to the staging area. The moment we landed and I'm coming off the bird, the battalion commander and the battalion chaplain and battalion sergeant major at the time, they come up to me and the chaplain was crying. And I knew that was not good. Like he's crying. So I see them and the colonel comes up to me. He's like, Specialist Wertz, I regret to inform you, but your son just passed away. And he's like, is there anything you want me to do? And I just told him, I was like, just let the guys, you're young, you don't know what to think, right? You don't know how to answer right away. And of course,
the shock.
It's shock.
The shock of what did you just tell me?
I just said, hey, I just want to get to my wife and I want you to let the guys in the rear, the guys back in Pakistan know that I'm not coming back. Mm. And so on my way out of Afghanistan, the way the rank structure is in the Army, you have team, squad, platoon, company, battalion, brigade. Brigade is the equivalent. A regiment is the same as a brigade. So like Ranger Regiment is like a brigade level. Mm-hmm. So the regimental command sergeant major. It said it's cold.
I know. Dude.
It's cold now.
Yeah, but I couldn't do the podcast with that thing running. Sorry about that.
No. The regimental command sergeant major was my personal escort home.
Right.
And so he's my escort home to make sure I get home on time or safely, I guess. Make sure I didn't hurt myself or anybody else. Right. I'm assuming so. Mm-hmm. But there's also, at the end of the day, he's probably a good human being who felt for this guy. So we leave the staging area from where we were at, which I was stuck there. It is another very, very interesting story. Mm-hmm. Because at the time, there was international problems about trying to get planes through German airspace because now America's at war in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. We didn't exactly have all the same allies, friendships, all the partnerships we have now, all the political things. We did, but we didn't, especially not with the technology at the time. So trying to get the planes through there, like there were some issues. And so I got stuck at the staging area for like 2 days. Like I was there. And so for like 2 days, I have like no contact with my, at the time, my wife at the time. I had like no contact with family. I'm just waiting like on the bunk for them to come say, hey, we're going to get you home. I'd go to the flight guy and I'm like, hey, are there any flights? He's like, nah, man, we'll let you know. Nothing's moving right now. I'm like, are you kidding me? Well, I had the brigade, the battalion commander say, hey, check it out. I have unlimited funds to send you back home. I can take you down to the main city that was by us, or I can get you out on a military aircraft. He was like, I'm not going to take you through the main city. Because, at the time, I was pissed. Of course, 20-year-old kid just lost his son. Yeah. I was mad.
And now you feel like they're not making it a priority.
Exactly. However, from now, pretty much hitting the same level he did as a battalion, because I retired as a battalion command sergeant major, making battalion command level. I can appreciate his thought process because we were brand new at war. We were in the Middle East. We had no idea who was going to come after us. I look very American, I'm a young kid, shaved head, super white.
Yeah.
And you're going to put me in a Middle Eastern airport to try to go home after we just invaded Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Probably not the best.
Hazard. Yeah.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Right. I may not make it home.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand his thought process. So either way, a flight comes in. So this is late November 2001. There was this like weird meteor shower that happens like once every like 1,000 years or something. Lo and behold, legitimately, I left the night of that meteor shower.
Really?
Yeah, I left that night en route to Egypt. So my route back was Egypt, Spain, and then Dover, Delaware. Well, we hit Egypt. I got stuck in Egypt. For like a day. So I'm trying to get home to bury my son. I get stuck in Egypt, see the Nile River, see some of Egypt, get stuck in Spain for like a day. And by this time, I'm stuck in Spain. Sergeant Major comes to me. He's like, hey, we're going to get you out of here. And I looked at Sergeant Major and I was like, Sergeant Major, I've heard it. I just need to get home. Either way, we got home. I could be long-winded, man. So
no, you're good, man. You're good.
I get home. I touch down Dover, Delaware. They pass me through customs. Like they didn't like look at my stuff. Get me through customs, and first time I saw my son was in the casket in his coffin.
Oh, so you didn't even make it to the hospital?
Nope. He was already transferred to the funeral home. She had already been out. She had picked me up from Dover. I was like completely by myself. Wife picking me up in Dover, Delaware, driving me back home to Baltimore. We had the funeral. So I got home, I think, the day before Thanksgiving of 2001. The funeral was the day after Thanksgiving, 2001.
Man.
Yeah. And so that's how that all went down. So that's what I was saying, that the whole Army Afghanistan thing is like coincide with the death of my son. Yeah.
That's horrible, man. I've never lost a child, so I have no idea how that feels, but I've been pretty close. My oldest got RSV.
Oh, yeah.
Really bad.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, people just think RSV is just a common flu. It can be.
Yeah.
But in babies, it's a possibility that it can affect them really badly. And I don't even know how old she was at that time. She was born in 2010 in the winter of November. And it wasn't too long after that I'm not big into just taking your kid to the hospital for any type of little cough, sneeze. You know, I'm not one of those guys. I waited a little too long on this one. And my wife had been telling me, hey, we got to take her. She sounded weird. I'm like, she's fine. You know, like give her some time. You know, she'll get over it. Well, I learned a lesson the hard way. And we actually woke up one morning and she was like, Gabriel, I'm telling you, something is wrong.
Yeah.
And it's early. I'm about to go to work. And I'm like, she's fine. Like, you're just overthinking it. Well, I turn over and she's like
labored breathing.
Yeah, bad. And I freaked me out. I was like, holy shit, you know? And we take her immediately to Children's Mercy. They're closed up north, so we take her downtown. They tell us to go downtown. And as soon as we get her there, I mean, they're ripping her out of my arms. Like, we need her, and shoving tubes down her throats. And they told us, they were like, man, if you would have waited one more day, you know, she would have died.
Yeah.
And scared the shit out of me, man.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about, you know, you want to be the greatest parent in the world and, you know, do everything right, but sometimes you just make a mistake. And I almost made a deep mistake that to this day I have learned. Now, I didn't turn to those parents that just take their kids to anything, but I'm more cautious. I trust my wife more because, you know, that's one thing I had to learn. Mothers have a different instinct.
They do.
Need to remember, like, hey, you don't know everything, dude.
Yeah.
All right. So trust her on that. And I've been doing better at, you know, okay, we need to, you know, do something. But yeah, man, that scared the shit out of me, man. And she was on a ventilator for weeks.
That long.
Yeah.
Wow.
For a while. Yeah. She wasn't there.
Yeah.
And lost all her hair. I mean, I have pictures of holding her, and at the time I was 18. So what stuck to me is when you said you didn't understand. Mm-hmm. I felt the same exact way. I cried. At the beginning, I just didn't know what happened.
Yeah.
It was just a shock. And honestly, I kind of look back as my older self and I'm like, because I didn't feel anything. Mm-hmm. I was just like confused and didn't understand. And it got to me later on, seeing my wife crying, being in the NICU, seeing other babies with priests in their rooms that had passed away, scared the shit out of me. Yeah. And that's when it kind of hit me. But that initial moment for the first couple of days, it's like, she's going to be all right. She's okay. Everything's fine, and then still having to work. And my wife luckily got off and she stayed there the whole time, but I was going back and forth, that was hard. But yeah, man, it's scary. I couldn't even imagine how you felt. I mean, you didn't even get a chance to even really wrap your head around it. Does that something, and you don't have to go into this if you don't want
good.
To,
yeah.
But is that something that has kind of stuck with you? Like, I just feel like it's, it happened so fast for you. I couldn't imagine how you were able to understand that and cope with that.
So cope, coping is like a new word for me. Mm-hmm. And I say that a little flippant because I always thought that I was just good, whatever, anything. I would just take care of anything. Yeah. And that actually led to a lot more of my issues from my deployments later down the road because I didn't accept what was going on.
Kind of just sweeping it under the rug.
Yeah, for a long time. And so I think for Ian, it was kind of like that. I kind of just did that for the longest time. And it didn't really hit me, I think, until it would have been his 16th birthday that it hit me that like, he would have been driving, right? Like I was doing something that was of no consequence. It was like a regular day. And it just hit me like, holy cow.
You feel like you kind of buried it?
I think so.
Happened. Yeah. Just kind of immerse yourself into your career and try to hide from it.
So what I did do, and this is where, and I'm going to use this as like a little, like we were saying, right? Like old communities, old men pass on stories of young men, right? That how to grow up or whatever. So that was one of my largest learning events, up until that time, that as I progressed through my Army career and I became that leader and I had dudes that now I'm leading in the combat, I was not going to let that happen to them.
Right.
And so there was one on my 4th combat deployment. I was now a first sergeant in Afghanistan, and every single soldier whose wife was pregnant, they would not go out on patrol. They were, by this time now, this was like 2013, like there was actually FaceTime then. So I was like, you'll FaceTime them. Most of the time I actually fought to get them out. I was like, I want to know when the kids are born. I'm going to do everything to get you home. Mm-hmm. You tell me you want to go home, you're going home.
Yeah.
And so that was like a driving, motivating factor for me. I only had one soldier once fight me on that. I actually had one guy say, no, I'm staying here.
Right.
And I made him, he wasn't allowed to go on patrol that day.
That's good too, because things I've read is that, divorce and, relationship problems, there's a lot.
Guys in the military. Yeah.
Because they're gone.
Yeah.
And the women that have to go through that, it's talked about. I don't think as much as it probably should be. I'm sure if there were some women on these podcasts, they'd be able to tell you how hard it is, dealing with not having your husband. I don't know how long a deployment is, but I mean, what is it? 3 months?
It's varied throughout the years, but especially, so that deployment was only 2 months for me.
But even 2 months.
Oh, that's a long time, right?
It's a long time.
But
especially raising a young child.
1 year became the standard for a long time.
Oh, okay.
1 year gone.
Was that before your career or during your career?
No, during my career. Oh yeah. So I've got actually on my 3rd deployment, which is actually a 1 year deployment, it was my second 1 year deployment. I actually almost lost my daughter on that one. So it would have been my 3rd child. Yeah.
God damn.
Yeah. And so that one was with a new wife. That one was with Julie. Mm-hmm. And I was actually, goes back to where Ian came in. So I was deployed. This time was Iraq. This is 2010. So my daughter was born in October 2010.
Oh, really?
Should probably have them meet up sometime.
Yeah,
it'd be great
for sure.
Yeah,
yeah.
And what a fun. It's a fun but horrible stage for a father once they're 13.
You're telling me, man. You're telling me, dude. It's like night and day. She hit 10, and she wasn't my little girl anymore.
Oh yeah,
you know?
Same
it's
with
like
same
Dad
with mine.
wasn't and honestly, I wish I would have been doing the things that I'm doing now back then. I was kind of in my later 20s, but I didn't stick to as much as I did now. But I mean, you know, I don't know. I just wish I still had that little girl. Luckily, I have my youngest who thinks the world of me. But my oldest is just like, you know how it is.
Oh,
just friends. That's it, man. The friends and the phone. That's all they care about, you know, which I kind of regret. I should have waited a little longer. But she hit double digits.
Yeah.
You know how it is.
We
like
did the same thing.
You want to be able to get in contact with them. And, and it started out like only you could talk to us. But somehow she talked to her mom and I want this. And can I call my friends? And, you know, it grows. But and then naturally, I mean, I remember when I was 13 and I wanted my space.
Oh, yeah.
So I got to accept that.
Yeah.
In hopes, and I know it will happen. You know, my wife tells me all the time that, you know, you're sad now and you miss her, but she'll be back.
Yep.
You know, she's gone right now, but she'll be back. You know, it just, you know, it sucks, man. You look down memory lane, you know, especially with your phone and you get these, with iPhone memories.
Yeah. The
pop
memories.
up and it's just like, oh man, that little girl, that, you know, and, but yeah, man, you know, it's kind of a chapter that closes, but other ones will open, you know, so.
I feel pretty blessed with my daughter, because she took my music taste.
Oh, nice.
So we get to enjoy that together. We're actually
awesome.
going to go to a Blink-182 and Pierceville concert in August. She is so excited for it.
That's awesome.
But yeah, we get to share that, and now she's starting to do some workouts. So she's got kind of that little daddy's girl still in her.
Dude, I need your help on that, because I'm trying to get this one into working out, and she doesn't want anything. I've tried Jiu Jitsu with her. I've taken her to classes. I've tried working out. I've tried getting her to hunt. She used to love hunting with me.
Yeah.
We hunted together long time, you know, and half the time she was asleep, but she was out there and she loved it. She loved walking around in the woods with me, and it was great times. But she gets older and she still doesn't mind it. It's just not a priority anymore. And I've noticed I need to get better at pushing a little more. You know, I can't expect her to come and want to do all these things, but yeah, man, that's great that you're incorporating the physical fitness side and instilling that in her, because that's going to play a huge part for her life.
Oh yeah.
The rest of her life, you know?
I think the thing is I had to learn is, because I was as once she hit like 10, I kind of pushed. I don't push now. I suggest.
Right.
I'm like, hey baby, let's go do this.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you get the whole radio the whole time. Even if it was terrible rap music, which I grew up underneath Cypress Hill, Tupac, Wu-Tang. I love those guys.
Yeah.
The mumble rap now is horrible. It's trash. It's trash.
No,
they don't have a message now. There's not a message, you know. Like NWA had a message, you know. So either way, even if she listens to the horrible trap music, I would let her play it, right? So I think that's what helped me with some of that. But
I had to learn that too, because it was always my way, and I had to figure out, like, you're gonna push her away, and if you don't allow her to, you know, you're going to be complaining about what you complained about when you were younger, like, oh, well, they didn't like this and they wouldn't do that. She's going to have the same thing, you know? So it's funny. And I've learned a lot of it, you know, listening to guys like Jordan Peterson, or, you know, these podcast guys. Even Joe Rogan has been a huge influence on being a father in my life and helping me navigate, you know, on becoming a better father, you know, because you just don't spit out a kid and you're a dad. You have to grow.
You have to grow.
Get better, you know, and just as much as you want to learn about cars or whatever hobby you're into, you have to do the same thing about parenting, you know, and because if you don't, you're just going to be that average dad or mom that goes home and just thinks that you put a roof over their head and food on the table, that's enough, and it's not.
Well, why wouldn't you want to take it seriously anyways, too, right? Like that's something else that's kind of hard. So you are going to have to grow. You have to learn. Like if you're going to learn about your favorite sports team, you have to learn about your child.
Yeah. How many of these people can spit out thousands of facts on people that don't give two shits about them?
No, exactly.
But yet don't put the same effort into raising their children.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what matters, right? That's the difference. Yeah. You have to do that. And sadly, I thought your story about your daughter to the hospital there, dude, you and I were right there. Like, right? Like when mother being in touch with how the child is, the father immediately was like, no, it's fine. Because we're thinking about other things. Yep. And if you don't come together and try to work the communication, which when you're young, you're 20, you're 18, you're not going to do that. You're still learning how to communicate yourself. And so then when you become older and now you got this kid and then you're just like, man, why are you acting this way? Well, if you don't sit back and reflect and think about when you were 13,
you lose that. You lose that in yourself. You forget. You forget.
Yeah.
I was the same way. I would forget. I'd say a lot of this stuff, luckily, one thing about, my kid's mother is that she is very conscious of that, and it may be because of her upbringing. Didn't have the greatest life. Yeah. Didn't have the greatest upbringing. And you can go either two ways, the same or the complete opposite. Yeah. And she went the complete opposite, which
that's good.
Is good. It comes with a little bit. That's where I kind of balance her out, because you're going too far on this other side of the pendulum. We need to have a balance here, And then me, I'm on the other side, where I need to calm down, remember, chill your temper, chill out and listen and understand. You're not always right. Yeah. And, but that balance, and that's the thing that's my relationship, and you see it from the outside, or you see it from Facebook, or you see it from Instagram. If you don't know me and you don't know us, it looks normal. Yeah. You're like, oh, damn, those guys made it. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever gone through in life is getting with somebody at a very young age and having to grow up with them. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And learning things about each other and yourself and understanding that people changed. You're not going to agree always on the same things, and dealing with tons of other things. We were young kids. We were out partying and doing, like we always kept a good home for our children, but we were young. Oh, yeah. So we still went out. We still did shit probably we shouldn't have done, it still, had to learn through things. You have to remember that people grow at different rates, and it was very challenging. And I see why the divorce rate is so high, especially now that, religion isn't so much pushed into people's lives. I feel like that was kind of the thing that kept people together. Not saying it was the right reason. Some people stay together when they shouldn't have, just because they were, of their beliefs. But nowadays, a lot of people don't have that, so it's easier to split. Social media, it's easier for other people to talk into your ear and make it seem like the grass is greener on the other side, when it's not. We all know that. You know what I mean? You're just going to take on a whole nother set of problems. You're going to have to relearn. But yeah, man, I mean, relationships, if I can give one advice, and, take it with a grain of salt, I don't know everything, but just what I went through, is you have to learn to forgive. You have to learn to understand. You have to be patient. And also, you can't make everything about your spouse, man. You have to be you. Yeah. I feel like some people just live to be with their significant other. And dude, that's a path you don't want to go that way. Trust me, you don't. No. And because I thought that at a young age. Thought everything was around your significant other, and it's not. You got to be your own person. Yeah. You have to both be your own person. Yeah.
So there's a few books on that. It's interesting because my current spouse, we hit a really bad spot. Really bad spot for a while. We actually split for 6 months. And
I've been there.
In that time frame, I did a lot of reading relationship books, and one of the books was one called Boundaries in Marriage, and that book, and the other ones are the Gottmans, right? The seven is the 7 principles of lifelong marriage, something like that. So it it's very interesting, right? Cool Army guy, Jiu Jitsu guy, reading relationship books, but there's a reason, right? I sucked at it. Yep. Second marriage, we were 12 years in, and then it's multifaceted, but one thing that I learned reading those books was exactly what you just said. If you could tell me you never read the book and I wouldn't believe you, because what you said was exactly the stuff in the book.
Well, I've listened, not necessarily, I've read some things, but I've also listened to a lot of things that maybe correlate with the books that you've read, you know, and like you said, I sucked at it. I was horrible, man. I wasn't a good husband. And it took me a long time to admit that. I wanted to point the finger at the other person.
Oh, yeah.
And when I'm not saying that things that other people do to you or that you do to them are okay because they were being a shitty person to you. They're not. Right. We all make our own decisions. You have to make your bed. You have to sleep in it. You shouldn't do things to hurt other people when you're not okay with them. But I came to the understanding that it wasn't just her fault. It was my fault.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that takes a lot for a man. You know what I mean? It takes a lot to kind of sit back and be like, hey, man, you know, you got some thinking to do on your own and some growing and some learning. And like you said, I sucked at it. So I listened and read a lot of things because, like you said, if you suck at something, educate yourself.
Yeah, it's your job
to. Know? I sucked at jiu-jitsu. I didn't know how to grapple. I don't come from a grappling background, but my mindset has always been, and I'm not any different than anybody else out there. You have to have, you're not born with this. You have to instill discipline, instill it. Motivation is not going to get you anywhere. No. Motivation is great. I love motivational videos. I love the Goggins and all that. Yeah. It's great. Sometimes I'll throw it on to get me fucking motivated, but it doesn't stick.
No.
Discipline is what sticks. And when you're first learning it, it comes and goes. But at some point, you will keep getting up, falling down, falling down, and then it'll stick. And you got to keep that discipline. You got to force yourself to do it. I don't want to work out 4 days a week, and I don't always want to go to jiu-jitsu. But I tell myself, well, I don't always want to brush my teeth either, but I have to fucking do it.
Yeah.
I don't always want to fucking take a shower. I got to fucking do it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think about it anymore of showering and brushing my teeth. I just do it. Do the same thing. Getting better at your relationship, you should just do it. It never stops. You never stop growing. Getting better as a parent, you never stop growing. Getting better at your hobbies, you never stop growing. Jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Does anybody ever stop not learning it, or does anybody ever not learn at jiu-jitsu? Even if you're a fucking coral belt or a black belt or whatever, you're probably still learning something, especially as time goes on and things are advancing and changing and you know, you're being challenged in different ways. So yeah, it's like you just have to, discipline is everything, man. That's how I basically chunk that up all into discipline of forcing yourself to learn, adapt, and grow.
So the self-growth, like the discipline to force yourself to grow, because if you grow and you're attempting to become the best version of yourself, when you have that lifelong partner, you know, maybe it's not marriage, maybe it's just a lifelong partner, but there's something beautiful about it, right? When you have that one person in the world that's yours, that you two will go through, you know, hell together with. The only way you can do that is if you're coming there as your best version every day. And how do you do that? By having the discipline to do those things, right? Like, okay, my spouse now, guess what? I'm going to come there in good shape, right? Because for one, I want to be in good shape. Two, maybe you like me in good shape.
Right.
I'm going to come with like new conversation because I'm learning something new. So we can expand our conversations, right? I want to know what you're learning now. What's a new thing you're learning? It's because hopefully you're learning too, and we can come together and grow. Maybe you've got a goal now, like you got a new hobby you want to try. Well, you know what? It's not for me. Like, okay, so she sews. And dude, it's awesome. It's amazing what she can do. I can't do it. Nor do I want to do it. I'll be honest. I don't want to learn.
But at least she has something of her own.
Yeah.
You have jiu-jitsu. Maybe that's not her thing, but sewing's her thing.
Yeah.
You guys don't have to do everything together.
Yeah.
You honestly should have some breaks. Some of the relationships I see where you're stuck at the hip with your wife, I know guys that are just, I can't go anywhere. I'm like, I'm not going to talk shit. Maybe that works for you. But a lot of the times it doesn't, man. I'll tell you that right now. A lot of the times it doesn't. You guys are going to get tired of each other. You guys are going to end up breaking up. How do I know this? For the longest time in my early 20s, I didn't do shit, but go to work, come home, chill at home, thought that's what you do as a dad. That's what I seen growing up. You know what I mean? And maybe it worked for him. It did. But it didn't work for my relationship. I became bitter because I felt like I wasn't growing as an individual. I thought that I had to grow in my trade, and I realized that that's not what gives you worth and significance every time. Some people it does. It didn't for me. Luckily, when I ended up finding jiu-jitsu and getting more physically fit because I had let myself go, I was athletic through all my younger years. My parents always, sports. You have to play something. I don't give a fuck what you play. You got to play something. So, money-wise, football and soccer were always the cheapest, more affordable things. So I was in great shape. It wasn't until I moved out, and I moved out at 18, right when I graduated. Moved out. My wife was pregnant. We weren't even married at the time. We got a apartment, moved in, and I just thought, all right, it's dad mode.
Oh yeah,
and that's what I did, man. And then, I was a big partier back then, I was drinking, just drinking a lot and just let myself go and gained like 30, 40 pounds. I mean, and what you just said right now, working out because you like that it helps yourself, but it also, I don't care what anybody says. You can say, oh, I love my man the way he is. If you got a fit body, you know what I mean? If you're in shape, I can tell you what, she will love you a little bit more. You know what I mean?
She can love you, but she will she will also like to look at Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying, right?
Like
there's the attraction. There's the eyes. Like she's still.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I feel, and I've been telling, and since I've lost a lot of my weight. I think you've seen me at the very beginning. I had blown up again. I actually was getting pretty fit a couple years back, fell off the wagon again, but got back on when I joined Helion, and I was back up to like 235.
Dude, I remember one of our first rolls.
Yeah.
I remember
I was a chunky guy, dude.
So I remember we got on there and I thought you were a wrestler. And I was like, man, this he's a large human being. Yeah. And because sometimes on the mats, I forget I'm not a big dude, man. Yeah. I'm a small human. And so, but I remember you're
not that small. You seem smaller out on the mats, but that's a great thing about jiu-jitsu, right? Don't matter.
Yeah, it don't matter.
You throw me around all the time.
Well, I remember that first roll. You definitely had like the new kind of white belt, like
spazziness. Yeah.
Not so much spazzy. You weren't spazzy, but your strength is beyond mine, and I'm a brown belt, and I think you can tell me if I'm wrong. You were going to try to put it to me a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Anybody can get it.
Everybody. So I remember we got done rolling, and I was like, if it wasn't for my skill level, you probably would have got me because your strength and size. Oh, yeah. So I do. I remember.
How long did that last, though? Like literally during that roll?
Oh, no. Yeah. By the end of the roll.
I burned out.
Yeah.
And you're just literally on top of me, just fucking playing with me, Like Gordon Ryan says, he's like playing with an untrained human is like playing with a child, And that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, Andrew's a smaller guy, throws me around like nothing. We just rolled a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it's a couple weeks ago.
Beat me up a couple weeks ago, dude. I mean, size does not matter. Yeah, we could be. That's the misconception about all these guys out there. And me and Jeremy were just talking about this. Imagine if football players humbled themselves enough to go into that gym. We would all be getting wrecked, dude, after a couple of years of training.
Yeah.
Because they're big, athletic. I mean, they would, oh man, I mean, sometimes when you're too big, it's not ideal, but I mean, everyone says that, but you've got Gordon Ryan who's 6'4", 230 pounds.
He's a monster.
Yeah. So big is a factor. Now imagine you having the knowledge of jiu-jitsu. I mean, but they don't because they rely on size.
Yep.
And can a lot of them get through life with it? Yeah, because it's intimidating. But I mean, you've seen videos. There was one not too long ago where these jiu-jitsu guys beat up some college football players in a bathroom.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the size difference was. It looked like there was a pretty big size difference. They couldn't do shit. Mm-hmm. They have real explosive, dynamic movement for about probably 30 seconds to a minute.
Yeah,
even an athletic person who a football player, but they're going to burn out because a fight is completely different.
Oh, yeah.
And tell me if I'm wrong, but a completely different adrenaline dump, cardio. It's just completely different.
Yeah.
And you see that, with jiu-jitsu. That's why everyone kind of rolls their eyes when I talk about jiu-jitsu. Oh, jiu-jitsu. Dude, I recommend everybody go on a mat and just roll with the white belt that's been there for 8 months.
Yeah.
And you will see what I'm talking about, dude. I mean, I've had guys come in and I've only got a little over a year or a year and a half because, training with 10 Planet, but that was years prior. But here we've been open, it'd be a year in February. So I got about a year.
Yep.
And I've had guys walk in their first time, they're my height or bigger, and it's nothing. I mean, I rolled with a dude that was like over 300 pounds. And, at first look, I'm like, oh shit, this dude's he's gonna hurt me. He's gonna lay on me. And nothing, man. I mean, I'm able to submit them like 3 times, in a roll. And that's every average or just normal guy's misconception that doesn't train is that they're going to rely on, I'm 250. Well, yeah. Are you 250 of fat? Like, have you done anything?
Yeah.
Like,
what's your conditioning level?
Yeah. Just because you're 250 doesn't mean that you're going to inflict any type of or the whole jiu-jitsu. Well, what happens if I punch you in the face? Well, you have to first punch me in the face. You know what I mean?
It's also, okay, you get punched in the face once doesn't mean you're knocking me out, guy.
Yeah, that's what I tell people, you know how hard it is to knock somebody out?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go up and sucker punch somebody, okay. But if you've ever been in a fight, and I haven't been in a ton of fights, but I've been in a couple fights, and you hit somebody, one, you have to know where to hit them. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you want to catch that chin.
Yeah.
And or I'm sure there's other places, but it's hard, dude, especially when that person has an adrenaline dump too. And they, if you've ever been in a fight, you don't really feel it until
after.
Yeah, after or a day later. That's when you start to feel everything, because that's what the body does. Dumps out adrenaline and fight or flight. You know?
Yeah. So but you're right? Like if we okay, so I got a kind of a funny story here. So my buddy from Chicago. So he was actually a collegiate level boxer. He was like 10 years younger than me too. So at the time I was a purple belt, and he was a collegiate level boxer. We were watching the fights one night, and we're both getting a little sauced up a little bit. So this is not like a great story by any means, but Mikey starts going. He's like, "Hey, I just got to test you, man. I just got to test you." And I'm like, "No, Mikey, we're not going to do this, bro. We're not going to do this." He's like, "Nah." So he starts jabbing, and he's like kind of going it. And then it starts getting harder and harder. And I'm like, "Oh, Mike, I'm going to hurt you, dude."
Yeah.
He's like, nah. So the jabs are coming in. Now he's getting like close. And then he's like, okay. I was like, fine, let's go. So now we're bowing up. Now we're like, okay, we're going to do this. It's going to be kind of playful, but somebody's actually going to get hit here.
Yeah.
So I'm using this just as like, it wasn't a big fight. But what I'm getting at is like, when people are talking about punching. So Mikey's jabbing, I'm moving in fast. Now I take one like to the head, right? Because when you move in with your head forward a little bit, so you take the hits. It's fine.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to get me on the side, or you're a really good boxer. I'm not acting like I'm a big tough guy or nothing. I'm just using this as an example.
Sure.
Like somebody might watch this, like, "Hey, I want to fight you," or whatever, dude. No, I highly doubt it. But what I'm getting at is, he gets a couple jabs right on the head. Once I get him, I take Mikey down. Game over.
Yeah.
It was ridiculously like easy after that.
Why do you think I joined jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
99% of fights end up on the ground.
Yeah.
Because what happens? Everybody starts throwing these crazy haymakers. Balance is a huge issue with people who don't train. You learn that in jiu-jitsu, how imbalanced you are. And then somebody gets tackled down to the ground. Yeah. And if you're on your back, that's probably the scariest fucking moment you can be in. Somebody mounted on top of you and just throwing blows. And with jiu-jitsu, you learn to cope with that. You learn to understand it's okay. I can figure this out, and I'm not saying jiu-jitsu is going to protect you in all cases. Cause like at our gym, we don't do a ton of strikes. John likes to incorporate it a lot on Fridays. So that's nice. If anybody comes on Fridays, it's pretty fun. Andrew does a little bit. He'll explain like, hey, if you hang out here, you're going to get punched in the face, so we do incorporate that a little bit. And because there's some positions you can't hang out and guard the entire time. No. You know what I mean? You don't want to be in half guard for sure. But there's it does still benefit you, because if you get on the ground, you've been there before. So you can know how to kind of get yourself out of that situation, or try to, get a hold of him to where he can't, just throw blows on you. You know what I mean? And get to sweep him, or, but yeah, that's why I joined.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's why a lot of people join. I was just scared to fall on the ground. I've been there. It's scary, man. You know?
So to go with like that thought, right? Like it's one of those where, is it going to have you win the fight every day? Probably not, right? Like, you know, luck has got a part of it. Size has a part. What it does though, and this is what kind of kills me, kind of going back to like the little difference between our culture now, our community, lack of community, is kids aren't getting together and fighting on the playground as much as they used to. There's not the jockeying for position. Jordan Peterson calls it like the dominance hierarchy or whatever, right? We're not doing that as much now.
Lobster.
The lobster. I love Jordan Peterson. Yeah. I'm actually going to go see him next month when he goes to Independence. I actually bought tickets for it, but he's right in it, right? Because we grew up that way. We grew up. I grew up like, I didn't wrestle by trade. I grew up wrestling with the guys around the neighborhood, right? That was our pecking order. Yep. So, okay, even at a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I might get into an altercation, which I'm going to try not to anyways.
Right.
And the dude might get that lucky hit and knock me. You might. I don't know. However, here's the beauty of it. It's going to make it a lot harder for you to do.
And that's the point.
Yes.
Is for you to be, Tim Kennedy says, like, don't look like the victim, or don't be a
soft target.
Yeah. Don't be a soft target. Yeah. And training is you can walk around and not look like a target. Yeah. And there's ways to do it. He explains it, you know, having your shoulders up, looking around, not being into your phone, being environmentally aware. But if you may meet a point to where that won't work, and you have to have something else to rely on. You know, like we said about the bigger guys, that's all they have to rely on, because once it goes down, they're going to hope that their strength and power for a certain amount of time is going to hold them over. But if it doesn't, then what? Yeah. And that's when training some type of combat or some type of martial art comes into play. And you don't have to be the next, you know, Gordon Ryan or the next UFC star. Being just a practitioner is just as important as well. You know,
for everyday life, right?
Yeah.
Everyday life.
It trickles into your personal life.
Is dangerous. Yeah. Every day, people don't really understand. Every single day when I walk out my door is the day that I can get mugged. I could get hit by a car. Somebody else could be getting mugged and I might want to intervene, right? Like there's choices we make every day when we leave our life to live.
Road rage incidents. Road rage. How common are those? Those are very common, you know?
So I'm going to put myself in a position to not be the victim, right? And for some people it's easier said than done, right? Right. Where I grew up sounds like kind of where you grew up, right? Like where I grew up, you were either going to be a victim or you're not. Now, I'm a small dude growing up in South Baltimore. A lot of dudes pick on you. I'm not saying I was a good fighter. I got beat up a lot, but I was scrappy. Yeah. So after a while, I got a reputation of, if you're going to get in a fight with Wertz, you're going to get in a fight with Wertz. Like, you might beat him, but it's going to take you a minute.
Right.
You know? So throughout life, like everything is based upon, okay, either you're going to be a victim or you're not going to be a victim. It's just really that simple. Yeah. You know, you have a choice.
And even me, like I wasn't a scrappy guy. I actually shied away from a lot of fights. That was my problem, is that I wasn't always the smallest guy, yet I always felt like I would act hard.
Yeah.
But deep down, I was scared, you know? And, and I never admitted it. I tried to play the part. I tried to dress the part, play the part, hang out with those type of people to make myself look hard. But deep down, I was scared. And that's why when I got older, I was like, well, I can't just rely on this false narrative that like I can do all these things that I don't even know if I can do them. What if the situation arises? What if I'm with my daughter?
Yeah.
And some guy attacks me and knocks me unconscious and she's there by herself.
Yeah.
I think every dad should think about that.
Oh, yeah.
Every mom should think about that, but especially every dad. And that's what made me go to this route of training something. And jiu-jitsu just kind of, there may not be striking. We do have a striking class. Mary's great at teaching boxing. But even if you just do jiu-jitsu, it's still something that makes me feel comfortable with a physical altercation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? If somebody grabs a hold of me, I'm not going to freak out. And I can't imagine at your level how that feels too, because like I said, I'm still new to it. So if I feel this way now, and, you know, maybe I've got that white belt high, you know what I mean? But I can't imagine when I reach a brown belt level, like how confident you feel in that scenario. Because I'm sure, I mean, I think a scenario like that would worry you to where, you know, something else could happen. Somebody could have a gun or a knife, or, you know, but if you just take that out and think of a physical altercation, you're not worried about that.
Yeah.
You know
I mean,
because you do it all the time.
I'm really not too worried about it because I already know it's going to be pain.
Yeah.
So.
And you put yourself through that, 4 or 5 days, 3 days a week?
Yeah, right now I'm not training as much as 3 days a week right now.
But even 3 days, how much of the population trains at least 1 day a week?
Oh man, it's ridiculously low. Like I don't even want to try to spitball the number of percentage because you know it's not a lot.
And this is what I talked to Jeremy about. And especially jiu-jitsu, because you can literally go in there, you learn something all the time. There's great people in there. There's hardly any egos in, I mean, the gyms that I've been in. I've heard of some horror stories, but the gyms that I've been to and the gym that I'm a part of, no egos. And you can go in there, train, learn something, and go 100% at the end of the night.
Yeah.
So you can recreate that situation and learn from it of what you did wrong, what you did right, what works, what doesn't. And you can do that if you wanted to 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And even at 3 days a week, I mean, dude, that other guys are going home and they're just drinking beer and watching TV and sitting on the sofa. Literally, your body is getting soft.
Yeah.
Your mind is getting soft. And when you're put in that situation, which I hope no one's ever put in that situation, but like you said, when we leave the house, it could happen.
Yep.
And we're naive to think that, well, I'm just going to call the cops. A lot of the times cops don't get there before, they get there after.
Yeah.
So you're the first line of defense. Stop relying on everybody else to make you feel safe or to save you when it's your responsibility.
It's absolutely your responsibility. It's so you were talking about like as a brown belt. I don't know. It's interesting. Like I said, I've been in the game for a minute now, and
yeah, tell them how long does it take to get a brown belt?
On average, about 8 to 9 years. On average, a black belt's 10 to 12.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is open mats, and that's one thing I love about our academy is the open mat because
2 open mat days. That's awesome.
How many people come there? Because the open mats is so you could go to class and I've actually been to academies. They don't roll during class time. There's no rolling. There's only technique. But open mat, to me, that's it. Like that's where you're doing practical application of what you're learning. And that's when you actually grow is when you're on the mats. Mm-hmm. And you should be going, like for me, I like to roll now, I try to go with other brown belts, black belts, but I specifically want the white, blue, and purple belts to come roll with me. Yeah. I do.
Because you could practice your technique.
So
right?
I'm practicing mine, but I'm there to I want you guys to practice yours too. Like you'll be surprised what you guys throw at me. I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. So I'm trying to adjust sometimes, or sometimes like, okay, I'm going to try to work something. I'm going to try to work on the precision of it. So I'm going to kind of go with somebody who doesn't know it yet.
Well, it's probably hard for you to figure out that dial until you you probably kind of know the dial with me and you because we've rolled, quite a bit of times. But even then, sometimes we may go a couple months and then I come back and it's a completely different roll. So you're having to fine tune because you don't necessarily have to go 100% with me.
Yeah.
But you want to find that line to where you don't get caught either. Because I've noticed that, I've caught some guys higher up belts. I know deep down if they wanted to, if they would have started off 100%, I would have got fucked up.
Yeah.
But they're trying to make it to where like, hey, I want you to work. I also don't want you to submit me that easily. So it's a weird matching energies.
Well, what's really interesting, and I start learning, and it really took me like upper purple, like junior brown to actually, like, 'cause when you first start rolling in jiu-jitsu, you almost can't comprehend like how did black belt get so good? And it's actually mat time. It's not so much the moves he knows, it's the time on the mat because humans only move so many ways.
Right.
They're only going to react so many ways. So once you start learning how humans react and what they're going to do, and then there's a few extra moves, but by the time you hit purple, you kind of see most of the moves that are kind of out there. The rest are just variations of it.
Joe Rogan says like purple belt's basically a black belt. You just haven't put your time in.
That's all it is. Yeah. That's all it is.
And he also says too, like you said, you like to roll with white belts and blue belts too, because not saying they're all easy. I'm sure there's some tough ones out there that you've encountered, but you can actually work technique a lot better on those guys because you're able to see things a lot better than it would be being stalled out by a brown belt or a black belt because you guys are kind of at the same level. So it's kind of hard to work in new things or try new things because you guys are that close to each other.
Oh, it is. So that is funny. So I choose the new scrappy white belts, like the brand new guys, because to me it's as close to a street fight.
I know, that's what I tell them. I'm like, I'm getting you ready for the streets.
Well, I view it for my street fight.
Yeah.
What if this is the dude that I just met because he's trying to take my 50-cent QT coupon for my coffee at QT, and I don't want him to, right? I'm going to fight you for 50 cents, right? Mm-hmm. No, but this is the dude who's had a bad day. He doesn't know me from Adam. He's going to go at it.
Yeah. And he's going to do some off the wall shit.
He's going to do some off the wall shit. Yeah. So is my jiu-jitsu actually good enough to keep this 200-pound human where I weigh $160? I'm 42, turning 43. Can I actually keep this 25-year-old, 200-pound male away from hurting me? Like, honestly, I don't care about submitting you yet. Like, when you first come to the academy, I could give two shits about, unless you're being a jackass, then okay, it's game on. Yeah. But I don't care about submitting you. I'm actually seeing, okay, is my jiu-jitsu game good enough that if this was a fight, am I going to be able to walk away from this?
Right.
And then the other ones is like you're saying, the blue belts, senior white belts, even some purples. Purples are weird. They're like straight voltage, man. They're weird. They could go either way. But those are the ones that I'm kind of like, okay, I'm going to work something on you. You may not know it yet, but I'm practicing something on you. That's when I start working that reverse triangle a lot. Yeah. I start reversing that a lot.
Well, I'm going to take a short break.
Okay.
I got to take a piss. So and then we'll come back. We're back.
Oh,
a little break, man. Kind of goes on for a while.
Yeah.
Let's dive back down into the military side. I know we're kind of getting caught up in the jiu-jitsu side, and we'll definitely swing back around to that. But so you were talking about 9/11. That all happened. What happened with your son, and that your first tour?
First tour.
Okay. You come back.
Yep.
How long before? Well, I guess let's start this. How was Ranger School? Like, how was that like progression from basic training? Did you just go from basic to Ranger School, or
no? Not the Ranger School to Ranger Indoctrination Program.
What's the difference?
So,
or is there not a Ranger School?
So Rangers are like, it's a very interesting monster. The Ranger. The Rangers are a very interesting monster because they're part of all like the American Army history. We've had Rangers since the Revolutionary War, and so with that, they've always been this other like kind of tiered element. They've always been the ones who kind of went outside, and for the longest time. It's very interesting. They were like special operations, but they weren't a special operations. They were like special operations before we had a special operations.
Why is that? Because you hear about the Navy SEALs, you hear about the Special Forces guys. Mm-hmm. You don't really hear much about the Rangers. At least I don't, from being a person that's not in the military. Is it because they're not really glorified in movies as much? Like,
one is that.
They don't have like, how Navy SEAL with Charlie Sheen or...
Yeah, it was Charlie Sheen. Yeah.
Yeah, so they have their movies that kind of...
Yeah,
got them out there. Everybody knows who they are, but there's not really a Ranger movie, I guess, that I've seen.
I think the largest thing that probably slowed Rangers down for it is because they were like special operations, but not special operations. Mm-hmm. And what I mean is, for the longest time, they were like elite infantry. So they were just trained in specialized infantry task, which is the same task another infantryman has, but they're just more proficient in the task. So when you go out and patrol, like a regular infantry unit, their rucksack would be like, so back in the day, their basic time frame would be like 3 days, come back, refit, and that kind of stuff. Rangers were a little different, especially Merrill's Marauders during World War II. They were like constantly on the move, hitting target after target after target. Where infantry, like regular infantry, you're waiting for intel, you get in a target. Where Rangers were going out, they were, getting their own intel. They were doing reconnaissance, coming back, and then attacking immediately after that. And so the principles that Rangers built is what actually kind of built into special operations. So then they started doing other stuff. So, like World War I, World War II, mainly like World War II, when you start having like OSS, start working with the Brits. We always had like this merge with the Brits. So the Brits would have the SAS, and we start building stuff like, then the Green Berets came around, right? That became a big thing because then there was a small 12-man element that would go teach up, guerrilla tactics to small groups, and then create a small militia army. And that's what they would do. Their primary goal was training, essentially not to engage the enemy right away. That's what they were training people to do, so that they could kind of maneuver them around. Rangers were always the ones, their primary goal is to engage the enemy. So some of their stories, even though they've been part of every major battle, every war that the U.S. military has been in, they didn't have some of the cool guy stories for the longest time. But they were always at the spearhead. So they were like the spearhead infantry unit. Almost most Delta operators came from Ranger Battalion. Like that was like where they kind of start. And so over time, especially throughout the global war on terrorism, is when the Rangers really developed a name for themselves, that they are a tiered organization. Before that, they weren't necessarily tiered. They were special, and they were, like I said, they were at the tip of the spear for everything. They were the guys who were going to go in, and they were engaging with the enemy.
Right.
So I think that's part of it, is like they've always been there. So there's nothing really that's like glorify, except for giant major battle, Rangers were there. Where like Navy SEALs were like, small group of dudes went in, UDT guys, they blew something up, they left. So I think that's part of why you didn't hear about Rangers a lot, because they are kind of associated with the large army, but they're also inside special operations. So it's super interesting.
So your first thoughts during 9/11, just like anybody else's thoughts, I think from what I've heard on a lot of podcasts, basically, I mean, you were already in it. A lot of the guys that weren't in the military got up, went to their nearest recruiter, signed up. How, I guess we'll kind of go down that, but at the time, everything's confusing. Everything, everything is, nobody knows what's going on, so you go over there, you come back, and then you go back out. Your second tour, how long before?
Oh, so my second tour was a few years later. So
you went to did your Ranger stuff after that first tour?
No, I did before.
So so how long does that take to become a Ranger? Like, is that?
So it's changed over the years. So when I did it, it was basic training, airborne school, which is 3 weeks. And then you had to wait for a RIP class, which at the time was called Ranger Indoctrination Program. So that was 3 weeks. And it was like 3 ridiculously hard weeks of your life. Like you're walking around everywhere. All they did for 3 weeks was try to get you to quit.
You guys kind of have like your buds type deal that the Navy SEAL has, right?
Essentially, it was like that. So buds it's like a 6-month school. And it's got 1 week of Hell Week. And that's what everybody hears. Everybody wants to hear about the all hard the TV stories. Shows, they don't want to hear about the 6 weeks of you learning your, skill craft of weapons proficiency. That's not sexy. It's not.
But it's crucial.
It's crucial.
Yeah.
So RIP is kind of like 3 weeks of like buds. Like it's ridiculous. They are doing everything they can to get you to quit.
Oh, it's 3 weeks of Hell Week.
It's 3 weeks. I don't
similar to Hell.
Yeah,
I know. Buds. Which one do you mean?
Well, Hell Week. Sorry, that's what I meant. Hell Week. It's like 3 weeks of them just trying to get you to quit.
Gotcha.
It's very physical. you're in the field for a lot of that time. A place called Coal Range. Any of my Ranger buddies who've been in regiment, been in Coal Range, they know Coal Range. You've probably got horror stories of Coal Range. Yeah. That's also when they're introducing you to land navigation. They're teaching you, some of the basics of patrolling, all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So back then it was 3 weeks. Now Rangers got a new thing called RASP, Ranger Assessment Selection Program. And that one's a little bit more, I don't want to say gentlemanly, because they still do some of the where they're trying to get you to quit, right? They're trying to get you out. But they're also training you a little bit more, because now the Ranger community is now grown where they are like tiered operators, where they are. There was a time in Afghanistan where Special Forces kind of had the run of the Special Operations community and were making all the decisions. Well, once they start losing their credibility because they start hitting the wrong targets and they are doing some really wazoo cowboy shit, Rangers were given that title.
Gotcha.
So since then, I mean, they very more reputable. So they've had to increase what their selection criteria.
What's something that almost sent you to want to rethink about what you were going to do, like being a Ranger? Was there something during that 3 weeks that you can remember that's like, oh shit, like what am I doing here?
I mean, it was almost a constant. It was just
there was no one thing. It was just a correlation.
There was no one thing. Yeah. It was just a correlation. All of it. I was like, man, am I actually wanting to do this? Because the whole time they're trying to get you to quit. They're like, hey guys, no harm, no foul. You're going to go to regular Army. You're still in the Army. Nobody's going to question you. You can go get an easy life. Mm-hmm. And so there's times where you're like, man, yeah, why not? Why not go for the easy way out? But I just couldn't.
On the airborne, are you guys jumping out of planes?
Mm-hmm.
How was that?
Oh, man.
Because I can't, heights. I can get up on a roof.
Yeah.
I can get up on a pretty tall roof, but jumping out of an airplane and parachuting, scares the shit out of me.
The parachute comes out automatically. It's to a cord, a static line, and it pulls it for you. So you don't do anything. All you're doing is leaving the airplane.
Oh, you don't gauge it?
No, that's skydiving. So you're jumping at a low enough altitude.
How does it pull on its own?
So it's connected. The top of the parachute is connected to a static line. That
goes all the way back up to the plane.
Yeah, it's like 12 feet long or something. It's not very long, 10 feet or something. Okay. So when you come out of the plane, you don't have to think about it. The only thing you have to do is worry if that thing opens, and you're going to know. Or
get over the fact you're jumping out of a plane.
Yeah. Let's see. The first time, you're scared. I don't think there's very few people who are not scared. It's what you do with your fear. That's the difference. Do you
guys do nighttime jumps?
Yep.
What's better, daytime or nighttime?
I mean, I prefer. It's weird.
I feel like I'd want night, so I don't see. It'd be dark as hell. Like it'd be a little easier to jump.
So I actually didn't mind the daytime jumps. Mm-hmm. For me,
even your first time, like you weren't.
Oh, I was scared. Okay. Every single jump I've had, I was like, that's it. I'm dying.
Because how do you practice that?
You don't really. I mean, they take you. Yeah, they do. They take you through simulators. They make you drop, and it's like a legitimate 3 weeks of trying to properly exit an airplane, hit the ground, and not get broken.
But it's just different when you're actually.
It is different. Yeah. But yeah, every single jump, I was like, that's it. I'm going to die tomorrow. Because you're on an 18-hour sequence. So you get notification, you're going to jump, you're going to jump, and then they essentially like muster you. They start the process 18 hours before the jump. And so for 18 hours, you're like, that's it. I'm dying. I'm going to hit.
Like that even during training?
Even during training. Really? I mean, we've had dudes get seriously injured from jumps during training.
I was going to ask you about that because isn't there I'm not saying there's a bunch, I don't know, but there's people who die during training.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Jumping.
Yeah. I bet.
But statistically speaking, you have a more likely chance of dying in a rollover in one of our big military vehicles than you do jumping out of an airplane.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've actually got a really good buddy. He and I were Ranger instructors together because later I became a Ranger instructor. So I used to teach Rangers. Mm-hmm. He and I were Ranger instructors in Florida, and now he lives here in Kansas City. He's also a retired Command Sergeant Major. And he actually has nonprofit here, Defenders of Freedom. Mm-hmm. And so he and I actually almost had a midair collision one time. So we talk about it all the time now. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you're in that, how long, or that you said that, how long that process was? What happens after you're done with all that? Then
you're in the regiment. Now
Okay.
you're in a unit. So okay. That's it. I'm bitching out. Putting a hoodie on.
I don't blame you, dude. It's cold in here.
I went 2 hours without it. So, from start to finish, let's see, I joined the Army June of 99. I got the Ranger Battalion December of 99. So it took about 6 months to get the Ranger Battalion. Ranger Battalion is different than Ranger School. Mm-hmm. And so Ranger Battalion is the actual special operations unit. And most people know it because they wear, back in the day, it was a black beret. Now it's a tan beret.
Okay.
And they have what's called a Ranger scroll. And everybody knows the scroll.
Yeah, I've seen that.
You've seen the scroll. Mm-hmm. So that's like what you are. And so you're now in the special operations community. The difference between that and Ranger School is a 62-day school, could be longer. Some of us have to recycle a phase. Like I had to recycle Darby, which sucked, which is the first phase. Mm-hmm. So, but that can take you, if you go straight through, it's a couple months. But it is a pretty tough couple months because you are carrying a rock on your back every single day.
Literally?
Like literally, you're carrying a rock on your back. Like either you're not carrying it to the chow hall usually, but you're having to carry your gear with you everywhere. You don't get much time to eat. You get very little sleep, like very little sleep.
That's my big thing is the sleep deprivation. Mm-hmm. It's like, how is that, dude? I mean, because, just me, working different shifts sometimes, stuff like that, it can mess with you. And I'm not going through what you guys went through, so I couldn't imagine. Like you start to kind of hallucinate stuff, forget stuff, like your body feels weird, you're mm-hmm. not thinking clearly, which could cause you to make a bad decision.
Well, so that's what they do it for, though.
In the to get you ready for that, because that's what you're going to see if you were to go on a tour.
Well, right? It's also the easiest way to get you into a stressful state, and it's very interesting, right? So as I've gotten older, I've read a lot more philosophy, and you start about learning about stoicism and how to control your emotions and this, that, and the other. Yeah. But if you do something like Ranger School, there's philosophy built into it.
Right.
So you learn when you're stressed and you're uncomfortable, how and you're sleeping in snow and it's snowing on you, and you're just like a little animal in the woods, how to still be a human and function, and how to make a decision, and then get another group of humans who are just as miserable as you are, and you have no idea how they're going to act.
Yeah, see how they react to it.
Like you're animals. At the end of the day, you're an animal. If you're tired and hungry, you are not the same person who woke up in your nice bed and you could walk to your kitchen. No, you're on the cold ground. You're frozen. I fell asleep in I was so tired one time in Mountain's Face. They told us we could actually put on what we call snivel gear, like our warm gear. I got my top on. I was putting my pants on, and I fell asleep in 9-degree weather. Ooh. And I fell asleep for it was only like 40 minutes. It's all the sleep I could get. But I was so tired. I was freezing. I was asleep. My brain turned off. And I remember waking up, and I was like frozen. I couldn't move my body. I was so cold. So imagine you run across a human being who's in that state, but they're hungry. And now you're telling them, hey, man, pick that up. We got to go. It's a very interesting crash course in psychology and philosophy.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine, man. I mean,
yeah, but you would love it. Somebody like you would probably like something like that because it brings sometimes the best out of people.
Yeah, I've always thought of it, but I just hate being that one guy that's like, I should have joined the military. You know what I mean?
No,
it's like, well, you didn't, so don't even bring it up. So, and maybe you wouldn't have done as good as I thought I would. You know what I mean? But yeah, man. I mean, I think that that challenge, I do gravitate towards that. But yeah, man, who knows? Like you said, when you're put in that situation, you don't know how you're going to react.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Especially a lot of these guys nowadays. They're always talking about, division of the country and all this stuff. It's like you do know that if you were to go to something like that and people are hungry and fucking, don't have money, and you'd see even people
Oh, yeah. Completely
you
different.
don't know them anymore.
They will be completely
So let's not
different.
talk about this lightly.
Yeah.
Because some of the guys who have been there, guys like yourself who have been in training and been in war, they've seen that side.
Yeah.
And they don't want that. Because I used to talk about it very loosely, like, oh, yeah, this shit just needs to fall apart. And a part of me feels like that. But I do know what's going to come of that if that happens. You know what I mean? It's not pretty.
I mean, I really wish people would read history a little bit more. And I do wish, and this isn't like me trying to just bash Russia or anything, but let's look at what the Soviet communist system did to human beings. Look at Maoist China. Starving, hungry people, the Bolshevik revolution in Russia. People were going to cannibalism. We really don't know. Americans really don't know, because it was like 4 generations ago. Now, when you start looking at American history, some of our early Americans, they were not living very well. We were considered poor by like British standard.
Right.
We were not a very rich country, and people were living hand to mouth essentially. And so if we think for a moment that people are going to be okay if this thing falls, I really wish people look at history. Look at what happened in communist Russia. I mean, people were fighting each other. Black markets rise. If we think it's bad now, it will be really bad.
Yeah, that's my issue. Not to steer away again, but is us not wanting to learn from history, keeping it from everybody. Yep. And that's literally how you're going to learn to not do it. And that goes to both sides, man. Some sides, they don't want to hear about other people's history, let's say African American, Mexican American, or even on just whatever the American side of it. Like they're like, oh, I'm tired of hearing that. Well, that's their history.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you got to understand that, just like we have our history too, other countries have their history. And I understand sometimes it's pushed too much in our face, and it kind of gets to that victim mentality to where you can't get out of it. It's poor me, poor me, poor. You're not going to grow, but we still need to remember it, learn, realize it, so we don't commit it again. Whatever it is that we were doing that was wrong, but by taking it completely away, even the nation's history, it's like you may not want to talk about some of these things because they were evil and bad and things that we were doing, well, not we, but they were doing a long time ago, is wrong, but don't take it away. Still teach it so that we don't do it again.
So we have an understanding.
Yeah.
It's funny because one of my last jobs I had was in Afghanistan. I was there. I left 2 months before the base fell there, but so I worked with the German army for a little bit. And, the thing people are like, oh, the Germans don't learn about World War. No, they do. Actually, the German army, I've had a lot of discussion with them, with a lot of soldiers about World War II. They're taught their history, and that's something they actually really do take into account. So that way they do not do that again. And
that's good, because I'm watching right now World War II in color on Netflix. Yeah. There's actually 2 of them. The one I'm watching, I can't remember which one it was called. They're both called World War II in color. But this one literally goes over World War II and from the beginning all the way up to Japan, Germany, and to see, and I think colorizing it makes it even more like hits you more. Because sometimes when it's black and white, you kind of can't really relate. It's hard to watch. Yeah. But when they colorize it like that, you go, holy shit, like how did they get so many people to follow that guy, And because, what I want to ask you, because since you worked with some of those guys, I wonder how long it took to take that out of them. Because if you watch those videos, he's marching through their town. Yeah. All of them are saluting Hitler. All of them are ecstatic, and maybe some of them are scared, so they have to, or they're just going with the show. But I wonder how long it took for them to relearn and say, like, hey, man, I understand what you guys were doing, but a lot of the stuff you were doing wasn't right. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And how to kind of take that out of the next generation for them to learn so they don't do it again,
I think Jordan Peterson has a very interesting take on people weren't following Hitler. They were using Hitler.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, well, he took advantage, right, of the economic
That's
crisis
what it was.
they were in.
So when we look at World War II, we have to also look at World War I and what happened at the fall of World War I.
That just happened, what, 20 years prior or something like that?
Yeah. We had to really pay attention to what we did to them economically. And then the lesson to pull out of that is we got to be careful with what we're doing with Russia now. Mm-hmm. That's what we have to be careful of. But, yeah, so I don't know how long it took, but that was a nation that I think it became, in the words of like C.G. Jung, like a collective unconscious. Like everybody, when Hitler essentially killed himself, they were like, "What are we doing?" Yeah. Right? Well, how do we get so tangled up, and how do we let this guy become the voice? Because they raised him up. You think about it, no dictator becomes dictator without the bottom people allowing him to become
without the heart
dictator.
of the people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, and that's scary, man. And imagine what they went through. You know, I'm sure there was a lot of Germans that were against what was going on.
Oh yeah.
But when numbers come into play, you kind of fall in line. We kind of seen that during COVID. Mm-hmm. You know, we've seen a lot of that during COVID, to where if you've got a lot of people that are very loud and they're telling you, hey, you need to follow this way, and this is what this is the way. If you don't, we're going to shun you. We're going to get you fired from your job, or you're not going to be able to go here and there. That's the same thing they were doing there, I guarantee, you know, and then having to afterwards, I'm sure having that stigma of I'm a German person. Everyone probably thinks I'm a Nazi.
Yep.
I mean, shit, dude, that's probably hard to come back from. I don't know. And they were probably shunned, you know. I mean, I'm sure after World War II, everybody was pissed at Germany.
They were.
I mean, as a whole,
yeah.
You know. So it's good to hear that they were able to learn and to progress and come out of that. Because I mean, nowadays you don't think of Germany, you don't think of a Nazi. You know, you just think of Germany's Germany. So it's nice that they were able to come out of that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Now we really need to learn from that, because nowadays we are shunning people and, you know, not accepting that they made a mistake and educating them on it.
Yeah.
We're just like, fuck you. We're not going to ever mess with you again. You're out.
Yeah.
And then you expect someone to grow and learn from that and change, and they get worse.
That's what I was going to say. There's no room for growth after that.
Daryl Davis, he's a guy on Joe Rogan. You know, used to take a listen to that podcast. African American who goes around to KKK people.
Oh yeah.
And literally, like, just has conversations with them. It's not there to intentionally convert them back, but just to, hey, man, you know, we're not all bad. You may think we're all bad, but we're not. We're just people like you. You're running off of a false idea because you're scared of change or a person doesn't look like you or may have the same culture as you. But in the end of the day, we're all people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, and that goes for everybody, not just even white people. There's Hispanic people like that, African American people like that, Asian. Like they all like, I always tell people, everybody has like racism throughout all races. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And really, it's like, it's just scared because you don't understand and you think that they're all like this, and they're not. It's just like white people aren't all racist. Black people don't all commit crimes. You think, you know, it's not like that. But what's awesome about him is that you sit down with him, or he sits down with them and just has a conversation. And by the end of it, maybe it takes a couple times, they're like, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. This guy's cool. Like, why do I think they're all like this? You know? And then they end up leaving. I mean, it's such a beautiful lesson in that we're losing, you know, we're just out here bashing each other on the internet, you know, and
we have more in common than we all think we have. I
agree, man. I agree. I completely. And that's what's cool about where I grew up. You know, I look white, but I came from what we think looks white or American or whatever, but I grew up in a divided household. Like my dad was Mexican and my mom was white, and I seen both sides, you know what I mean? Like, you know, my kids, you know, my wife is Mexican, and I see both sides. And that's why I've always been real neutral, man. It's like, I'm not here to finger point. Let's just all get along. We're all fucking human beings. We all got issues, you know, like we're only going to learn is if we talk to each other and learn from it and respect one another, you know?
Well, here's a funny thing. So you said your mother was white. Mm-hmm. What was her background? Like was
Irish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And look at what they went through. I mean, they, not necessarily my mother, but there was a time in history where Irish Americans went through their struggle. Italian Americans went through their struggle.
Yeah.
Asian Americans went through their struggle. Everybody goes through a struggle. You know what I mean? I mean, you're not just born just the white. There's a lineage behind that. You can trace back and that's what I'm saying. Now it's like we have so much things, like we shouldn't be fighting each other of who has more and who has this and this person's got it better. Let's just all get together and let's figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have the tools. We just don't want to. We go back into primal mode and just want to beat each other up, like we're in different tribes.
Yeah. Yeah. I just thought it was funny because you're like, well, my mother's white. Well, if you take that white person, you put her in Europe, well, which white person are you?
For sure.
Are you English? Are you Irish?
It's
you
even
Italian?
Mexican. Do you have a Spaniard background?
Yeah.
Or, there's a lot of Irish. Look at Canelo Alvarez, the famous boxer. Dude looks like straight from Ireland. You know what I mean? Because he probably has Irish people settled into Mexico. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're all mix of something.
We're all mixed.
Go take a 23andMe and you'll figure it out.
I did both 23andMe and Ancestry.
I want to do it.
Yeah. It's actually really cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. That way you can kind of see like where your history is, you know what I mean? Because some of us don't have that passed down.
Yep.
Like my mother, her mother died when she was real young. Her father died when she was young as well, and she knows a little bit, but I think she did a 23andMe and kind of learned a lot, behind that. So yeah, it's pretty neat, man. But back to that. So second tour, you're going back out to...
So second tour was Iraq. So after my son had passed, I left Ranger Battalion.
So first one was Afghanistan. Then we go to Iraq.
Yep.
I'm glad we're bringing this up because I want to talk about this.
In between, I became a sniper instructor, so I used to train snipers. So I was not part of the invasion of Afghanistan because I was a sniper instructor at the time.
Yeah.
And then my second tour... Now I was a sniper in Iraq. So that was 2005. So I was a sniper in Iraq at that time.
What gravitated you towards sniper?
Again, it's one of those, it's taken me a long time to go back and reflect. As you get older, you reflect more. I really was like this kid who I wasn't going to be a victim, right? Like that's part of mentality. So that's that chip on the shoulder kind of mentality is like either you be a victim or not. So I wasn't going to be a victim. So chip on the shoulder. I always felt like I had something to prove. So, and then to me, it was all about the story. It was all about fun, right? Like a little bit of wanderlust. And when you're young and you got that testosterone flowing and you want to test yourself. So anything was thrown at me. That was it. I was taking the test. So I was like, okay, let me learn how to be a sniper. Snipers are super cool. I grew up in the city. I never shot a gun until I joined the Army. So for a kid who didn't grow up shooting guns, I was like, well, let me learn how to shoot a gun and become like the best that I can.
Did they see something in you during training that they were like, oh, this guy might be a good sniper, or just...
When I was in Ranger Battalion, they did.
Okay.
Some of the guys did. And so then I became a sniper, and I learned sniping is different than Ranger, and it's two totally different beasts. And that could be a whole nother podcast almost.
For sure.
And so then I did. My second tour was I was a sniper in Iraq at the time. Yeah.
How was Iraq compared to Afghanistan?
Iraq and Afghanistan are two totally different beasts. And it's also by which time frame, right? So it's super interesting because I was there, 20 years of my life was in and out of the country. So 2005, you wanted an Afghan deployment. Now, Afghans fought, don't get me wrong. They actually fight harder than the Iraqis. Mm-hmm. Iraqis, you start shooting at them, they're running.
Yeah.
Afghans, you start shooting at, it's like they multiply. And then they also hit you from different angles. So they fight a completely different way. Mm-hmm. Where Iraq, the reason you wanted like 2005, Iraq versus Afghanistan was now you're dealing with insurgency. You're dealing with foreign fighters from other countries because Iraq became a hotbed.
Right.
So it became, more dudes were dying in Iraq, than Afghanistan. And arguably still now, even though Afghanistan was 20 years, in the 10 years of Iraq, we lost more in Iraq than we did all 20 years of Afghanistan. So Iraq was that was the wild, wild west, man. When you left the FOB, the forward operating base, you knew you were getting contact, or you were going to get blown up because IEDs.
And fighting style, right, was kind of fairly new, right? I mean, the terrain, the style of fighting.
Oh, it was different.
That's what I'm saying. A different type of
more city versus rural.
Yeah. From when the Vietnam guys were coming out in the jungle.
Yeah.
And then coming into more of a desert terrain, city urban environment. You know, and then I guess they probably dealt with not IUDs necessarily, but they dealt with bombs and stuff like that.
Yeah, so, they'd have booby traps, toe poppers, stuff like that.
Yeah. So, but I've just heard the podcast I listened to. They just said it was different. It was a lot different that they kind of had to learn on the fly.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's one of those, and this is where I'm going to sound like the controversial guy. So, okay. In all fairness, yes, if I fight a boxer, it's going to be different than fighting a grappler. Right. But at the end of the day, the basics are still kind of the same. Right. So I'm still going to want to get close to you. I'm still going to try to prevent you from punching me. So there's still there's some still basics. I'm going to try to hit you. You're going to try to hit me, blah, blah, blah. So to me, fighting in the desert and fighting in urban, yes, they're different, but they're the same basics.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know.
Minor adjustments there.
To me, they're minor adjustments. To me, the basics are the same. Where my weapon goes, where I see is where I shoot. Where there's cover, I get behind it. Be it a tree or be it a rock or a building, it's the same principle.
So in Iraq, were you a sniper at that time?
Yeah.
How was that? Because what year was that?
2005.
Okay. Is that during like the Chris Kyle type deal or
interestingly, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm nowhere near.
He's just the one that sticks out to me sniper-wise. I'm sure there's tons of snipers, but he's kind of the one, famous.
Well, you had the most confirmed kills. You're going to be, but at the same time, and it's not taken away, but giving how the battles he were in, it's a little easier to rack up the kills, right? Again, not to take away, you still have to shoot the human. That's where the difference is.
Are you cool with talking about stuff like that? Okay. Were you in situations like that as well? Like kind of what you said Chris Kyle was in, being in those type of...
Not as intense as what he was
Not
in.
as intense,
no.
But you've had your moments.
I've had my moments.
Have you ever been... had to do something like that, like take out a...
Yeah.
How is that? Like, if you can explain that to me somehow, like
what, like psychologically?
Yeah, like how's that take a toll? I've heard some guys say that at the moment it doesn't.
Nope.
It's just a target. You move on. But then I've heard some guys say some do, some later on it affects them, and some it doesn't. It just and I've always wondered that from my perspective, because you always think like, well, I could do that if I had to, but war gets a little weird, because dealing with possible wrong information, maybe a mistake, I'm not saying that's something that you did or they did, but it could happen. So I could understand how it could play on your mind, like,
So I would say short answer is yes to every one of those situations, right? For me personally, it really didn't affect me until later. It wasn't until later I would be legitimately like just sitting there doing nothing, and a thought will come in your head from nowhere. It's not like you're in charge of it. It just pops in and you go, what the fuck did I do? Like, what the hell? And if you stay in that thought, there's two ways to stay there. Either you stay there and you kind of, and I'm going to throw stoicism, you kind of piece it apart. You kind of have to separate, and it's really hard to explain, but you kind of separate yourself a little bit so you can actually go into the thought and pull it apart, CBT, right? Like cognitive behavioral therapy. Or you sit there and you mull and mull and mull, and then you go down the PTSD route, like you just don't come out of it. And that is a really hard thing. It takes a lot of time to actually do. And where I think we're messing up, and again, I always kind of go back to ancient man because I don't think we're that different. Where like ancient men, going back to community, most of the time they probably had somebody who was in a war, who could identify, okay, you're having an issue. Let's talk this out. Let's figure this out with you, and we're going to pull you out of it. That's where we're messing up with veterans, is that lack of mentorship.
So you guys are having the same issue as not having a good enough community to be able to help these guys get through that. Yeah, because they're not going to listen to some therapist that's never been through what they've been through, try to teach them, oh, well, this is how you handle this. It's like, dude.
Yeah, even though the therapist probably knows exactly.
Probably does, yeah. But it's always...
you've never been there, you don't know.
Yeah, and it's kind of like culture too. Mm-hmm. Like you relate more to somebody maybe from your shoes, you know, than you do. And it's the same thing, I'm sure, with, you know, military guys. It's like you want to talk to a guy who's been through it like you, you know, been in similar situations. So, yeah, I mean, I completely get that, man. And, yeah, but I you know, I've that's always been a big question to me, man, like, you know, how you guys are able to kind of get through that, like what you guys kind of do, you know, to get yourself out of it. Because a lot of guys, from what I've seen, like, you know, my grandfather was a Vietnam veteran. I think he did 2 tours. One, he got drafted. The second one he signed up for. He was a 50 cal machine gunner and did a lot of stuff that really jacked him up. Stuff that he never told me about. I mean, he was sadly just a bitter person. I mean, I didn't really have a great relationship with him. I was young too when he died. But I feel for him because I can't imagine what he went through. I mean, he was just, from what my grandmother explained, a completely different person when he came back, and actually told me some stories about the things that he revealed to her that he did. And it was just stuff. I mean, you've heard about Vietnam stories with kids and, you know, stuff like that, you know, having to follow orders, man. And, you know, these guys were using children and women and stuff, hiding behind them. And, you know, as a soldier, it's like, well, am I going to let my guys get hurt, or am I going to take out the threat? And, but at the time he thought he was fine, but he comes out and he just turns into an alcoholic and just drinking all the time. And that's all he did, man. I mean, until he died. He literally died from alcoholism, you know? And, but that's what I hear a lot that kind of happens, you know, with guys.
Well, the GWAT veterans got the same problem. It's the same problem. And I think it really started with the Vietnam era. Is the separation of how our society, and so there's like subcultures in society, right? So you have like working class, you have blue collar class. Well, we're now created a culture where we have like warrior class, for lack of better terms. So like the military society is kind of like your warrior class. We're no longer really kind of part of society. There's a great book by Sebastian Junger. I'd highly recommend it to anybody, Tribe. And I think he kind of hits the nail on the head in the book, where World War II, almost every single family in America was affected by that war. Somebody in their family went to that war. Fast forward 70 years, roughly 70 years, 60 something, GWAT starts. And man, like, you do not have those numbers. Very few people have been affected by GWAT on a scale. Because once we got rid of the draft, which really started in the Vietnam era, it started at the tail end of Vietnam. They got rid of the draft in like 73. So once you got rid of the draft, it was all volunteer. That's how you got these guys like myself who've got 6 tours, you know. Before that, and to hear your grandfather do 2 tours of Vietnam, that was actually kind of unheard of. Most dudes did 1 tour and that was it. They're done. So you have this really interesting divide. And then when you have less than 1% of population who joins and fights, and even inside that 1% population that joins, an even smaller percentage has actually fought, who've actually pulled triggers and been underneath fire. Man, it is really hard to get those guys with a community that they understand. Yeah.
And they just feel like they can't relate, or
it's hard to relate. It is. I mean,
I'm sure a lot of them miss it too, in a weird sense.
In a weird way, you do. It's very odd. I've tried to tell people combat is one of those times you never feel more alive in your life, and you're more connected to people because there's so much emotion. It's a real, you don't get much more real than combat. Right. It's just the way it is, emotionally, everything, visually, everything. So it is very hard to come back and actually get the same kind of experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so second tour, went through fine.
No, that one messed me up.
Did it?
That one messed me up.
So the first one, other than what happened with your child, that was hard, but the first tour wasn't as bad.
No, the second one messed me up. I came back. I actually, very similar story. I started drinking heavily.
If you don't mind, what made the second one different?
One was, so Jordan Peterson talks about it, is when you see the monster, right? Like what happens with people is PTSD is essentially when you see malevolence. And when you're facing malevolence and you're not sure how to handle it, and it's even worse when you find out that malevolence is in you. So a couple of things that I did really haunted me for many years. Like it wasn't so much seeing people die, it was my actions, either A, that led to their death, or while they were dying, like laughing at them, right? I come back because in the moment you're like, yeah, you're laughing, oh fuck these guys, whatever. Well, then you come back and you get back into a place where you can be a human again, and then all of a sudden you're like, what kind of monster like does that? Like so that's what really hit me. Like I was a fucking monster.
Because you had to put your mindset in that way, though, to be the monster in order to do what you had to do, And it's just like when Jeremy was here and we were talking from the fighter's perspective, he said that he didn't like who he was when he fought. He had to be that person. Yeah. You know what I mean? In order
Mike Tyson used to cry.
Yeah. In order to put himself in the ring or in the cage. And that can take a toll on you. Oh, just like you had to be a certain person in order to get the job done that you're expected to do. Yeah. And it came at a cost, of you being somebody that when you're stateside, you're like, oh man, I do not like when things settle down and everything calms down. You're like, oh man, I do not like that person.
No, I don't like that person. Sometimes I'm like, I can't even believe I was that person. And it's interesting because, like I was just talking to my wife about this the other night. I enjoy going to combat. Like I said, it's the most real thing you can do.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because they say it's better to be the warrior in the garden than the gardener in the war. I'm sure there's not everything you liked what you did, or that you were okay with what you did, but I'm sure you'd rather know you can go to that level or then rather not be able to go to that. Like you know you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so what kind of, so you get back, you're dealing with that. Do you automatically figure it out, or do you just go on to your next tour?
I just went on my next duty assignment was, well, then I became a Ranger instructor, and because some of the politics in the Army at the time, because we were really low on Ranger tabbed individuals, especially Sergeant First Class, which is E7. So if anybody watches this, they can look that up. But I wound up having to do 4 years as a Ranger instructor. So 4 years walking Rangers through the swamps of Florida. But during that time, first marriage failed. Again, I could say all kinds of stuff about her, her fault, but let's be honest. I had a piece of that too, because it takes two. I was drinking heavily. I was not dealing with my problems because
working a lot.
Yeah, I was
getting deployed.
Oh yeah. So then the second wife comes in, and then I leave, and we got married. 6 months later, I'm in Iraq for a year. Shit. And that's when my one daughter, my 13-year-old, she almost died when I was in Iraq, that tour. And because of what happened with Ian, I came home, I watched her get born, and then 4 days after her being born, she started tanking. Oh, shit. And my wife at the time, she she was like, oh my God, I'm so tired. She didn't know baby was tanking. She went to go take a nap. I come back, I'm watching the baby. I'm like, baby's limp in my arms. Well, everything from Ian came back up. We called the hospital. We take her in. She wound up doing like a week in a hospital. She was going to die. But because of what happened my first tour, I called my leadership and I was like, I'm not coming back until my daughter's okay. And so I stayed home. But yeah, so that was my third tour, 1 year. I will tell you that tour, not as bad. So that was 2010, 2011, Iraq. I left because Iraq ended. The official war ended I was like November 2011. I left June 2011 from Iraq, but very little on that one. I mean, it was, I never pulled my trigger once. So for me, it was a good tour, right? Like,
so you come back home from that one, and then how long before you go to your fourth?
Like 18 months. 18 months, something like that.
How was that one?
That one was a tough one. That was the one that I actually got. I got medevaced out of country on that one.
So was Iraq just kind of chill on the
2000
on the third one?
Yeah, that was.
And then it just picked back up, or were you in certain? You were doing certain things that made it escalate, like you were in certain positions.
No. So my fourth tour was Afghanistan. So Iraq had closed down. I was towards the end. Iraq was like pretty chill, man. I mean, I'm telling you, Iraq. It did look like, now this was underneath the Obama presidency, which is a whole nother beast. Yeah. So what we didn't know at the time was how the Muslim Brotherhood uprising was going to affect the Middle East, right? So when we kicked off Iraq, by intelligence, we knew that was going to create like what was it, powder keg in the Middle East. It was going to fracture the Middle East if we took out Saddam, which absolutely happened. It turned into a horrible time. What we didn't know when we were closing down Iraq, because now it'd been, 7 years Iraq was going on. We'd lost a lot of American soldiers. And so the American culture was like, hey, we got to get out of there. Technically, and it sounds horrible, we only lost 4,000. I say that not flippantly, but at the same time, look at numbers compared to Vietnam. Yeah. 10 years of Vietnam, we lost 57 or 58,000 soldiers. So for us to lose 4,000, a little over 4,000, I think it's like 4,500 in 7 years, man, that is, it was sustainable by the end of Iraq. So I can understand them saying, hey, let's leave, but we didn't know what was going to happen with the Muslim Brotherhood, and then ISIS kind of came out of left field. So, but it was chill. Iraq was chill at that time. Afghanistan, 2013, that's the one where I got injured. Where we went there, so now Afghanistan became the tour you didn't want.
Gotcha.
Because now all the foreign fighters were moving into Afghanistan, and that's where you were going to get into a firefight. Yeah. It was like Iraq 2005. Once you left the FOB, you knew it was going to be game on. And where my company, so now it's company first sergeant, where my company got embedded into was Wardak, Afghanistan, which was like at the time the Super Bowl of Afghanistan. Like you were going to be fighting. Even though they said combat operations had ceased, no. Gotcha. Like we were paired up with some Czech military guys who were advising the Afghans, and we were the security element. We were duking it out like every day. It was ridiculous.
Let's take one more break and we'll dive back into that.
Okay.
All right, so we're back.
Okay.
All right, so we're on fourth tour. All right.
Fourth tour. So that's the one we knew we were going to be getting into some fist fights. Like it was Wardak. And so that's the tour I got injured on. So that was slotted to be a 9-month tour. But I got taken out at month 3. Like we got there, and man, when did I touch down? It's like the end of January, beginning of February, touchdown in Wardak. Because where we were at, I mean, there's only one highway. Our main job was keep the highway secure and get the supplies between 5 Airborne or Shank, which is over in Logar province, down to Ghazni. So that was our main job. And so being the knucklehead that I was, even though I was a first sergeant, I went out with my guys all the time. Like if they had a patrol, I was going on patrol with them. And maybe it's like overbearing dad.
Was that not common or?
It wasn't common.
Okay.
It wasn't common. Not that it's like frowned upon because you want leaders who are willing to fight, but it wasn't very common. I'm
sure that bond, they created a strong bond with
my
crew.
Guys. Yeah. The dudes, we had a fantastic company. I love that company. Bravo 315. Love that company. Me and the company commander are still really good, great friends. Mm-hmm. But, so interestingly, I actually stayed back on one of the patrols, and my guys had been like fighting all day. Like they just got in fights all day. And a company of engineers that were attached to us, because we were the infantry dudes, they got hit, and one of their guys, he got killed that day. So my battalion leadership called up, hey, we got to go support this guy. And I was kind of a dick. I was like, let their company go support him. My guys are fine. Again, kind of younger, still kind of thinking, bullheadish. They're like, no, we need to go support him. I was like, fine, send me out there. So I went out to go support my guys. And I was going to support them anyways, but found out one of my lieutenants, platoon leaders he got rattled by an IED, like mentally. So we sat him out, said, you can't do the next patrol. I took over that patrol. So I became the leader for that patrol. And on that patrol, we were coming up to a place called Mollygale, and we knew we were going to get attacked in Mollygale. Always did. It was ridiculous. Like, so we'd get out, we fanned out, we got security, pushing through, and we were just kind of pushing. We're out on wide open. And I remember, and I look back on it now, like I was such a knucklehead. So first time in 4 years, I wore Peltors. Like I didn't wear them in my first few tours.
What are that? What is that?
They're ear protection.
Okay.
So when people shoot or you're shooting, it silences or dampens the loud explosive part, but you can still
I've heard you guys get a lot of hearing loss too from that.
Oh shit, man,
you get not wearing your hearing protection or something like that.
Again, it was fairly new. Yeah. So earplugs,
or I'm about to say the 3M earplugs.
Yeah, those. Okay, in a firefight, you weren't wearing those because it dampened everything, right. So you couldn't hear everything. The dude's calling you on the radio, you're pulling the damn things out all the time. So I know I didn't use them. So
God forbid somebody sneaks up on you too. Yeah, that'd be crazy.
But Peltors came out, and they were like, but I was like cheap. I wasn't gonna buy those things, So I wound up getting a pair issued to me, and I was wearing them. And I remember I stopped, I took a knee, and as I look back on it now, I was such a knucklehead. I was so worried about being attacked from the outside and everything like that. I actually took a knee not far from like the only tree in the area.
Yeah.
Right?
A tree in Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, they actually have a few trees. I mean, quite a few. Yeah.
Have a few?
Yeah. Depending on which region you're in.
Yeah,
but this was like the single tree by a house, a small hut out in the middle of like nowhere. So I took a knee, so 70 meters or whatever that comes, about 40 some feet away. Yeah. It doesn't sound like far. And it sounds far, but it's not. So I remember I took off my helmet, messing with my Peltors. I looked at my FO, my forward observer, and I was like, man, these things are killing my head. He's like, yeah, I know, First Sergeant, just put them back on. So I put them back on. I took 2 steps and I got blown up.
Oh, shit.
Like, so at the base of that tree was about 100 pounds of HME, homemade explosive. It was fairly deeply dug. And that whole thing just gone.
What sets them off? Just like a pressure sensor?
So there's different ways. Some can be pressure censored. This one was command detonated. Somebody,
so watching you.
Somebody was watching us, and he used that tree as his marker. Oh, that's why I say, like, when I think back to it.
And would you say this was an urban, like a city environment?
It was right outside the city. Okay. We knew we were going to get hit in the city, so we stopped.
It's like more like mountainous terrain?
Well, we're out in the mountains. It's right at the base of the mountain. So, like at the base of a mountain, like if you're driving to Utah or Arizona or someplace, right, or Colorado, at the base of the mountain becomes very flat. The valleys, right? So that's right at the base of a mountain. We're at the valley area. So, like, I look back on it, man, I was I wasn't like fully there because I was trying to coordinate everything, right? I've got guys on one side of the road. I'm trying to make sure they got comms. We're bounding through the objective. I've got planes on standby. So I'm talking, to the planes. And so, okay, like I got a lot. I didn't think about the tree that if I was a bad guy, I would totally have used that as my marker to blow people up. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I took 2 more steps and I got completely interestingly, I didn't take any shrapnel.
Yeah, I would say, you were right on top of it.
I was
right?
the closest one to it. Yep. I was the closest one. I took the whole overpressure. So in World War I, when we first got introduced to artillery, because that's when artillery first started, was World War I, they used to open up tanks on the battlefield because people were like, oh man, it's a big metal tank. It's going to stop you from everything. What does not stop is the concussive wave.
Yeah.
Energy moving through and that hits you like a blunt force object. So I took the whole concussive wave. So on the outside, I looked fine. On the inside, I was a jumbled up mess. Man. My lungs got completely destroyed. I'll get to that. So either way, we got hit, and even to this day, I do not remember everything that happened afterwards. Mm-hmm. Did it knock you unconscious? It did not. So this was my 4th tour. I was out there with a lot of guys on their first tour. I was I don't want to say afraid. I think afraid might be the wrong word. I was prepared for counterattack that I immediately went into reaction mode of counterattack. So I never hit the ground. I was actually, and there was also a part of me that was pissed. I wanted to shoot somebody in the face. I was like, somebody's fucking dying today. Yeah. Nobody died that I know of, but no. So I never got a chance to shoot the guy back because once we got done, no counterattack happened. That was it. Whoever blew it must have been. He fucking ran. Yeah, he was gone. And so after that, we did tactical site exploitation or TSC. I mean, I jumped in the hole. I do remember jumping in the hole, and it was, I'm not tall, I'm 5'6", but it was up to my chin. That's how deep it was. And it was probably a good 10 feet wide. It was a very deeply built. And so 250 meters away from my location was a MAT-V. I don't know what it stands for right off the top of my head, but MAT-V, which is one of our large military vehicles, the thing got rocked. So just to give you an idea of how much force I got hit with, it was ridiculous. I did have a concussion. They tested me that night. So I did the rest of the patrol. We walked another 1,000 meters. I got in the truck. I did the rest of what I needed from the truck. Got back to the FOB, or the cop that we were at, Assault and Kill. And I remember at the time I went in and I saw my company commander because their offices were together, and we slept in the headquarters there. We slept next to the TOC, the Tactical Operation post there. And I was like, first time got blown up, no big deal. Totally blew it off. Next day I woke up, or just a few hours, 6 hours later, I woke up and it was looking through a fish tank. Everything was blurry. I could not think. I was trying to run my company. I couldn't. I remember my guys telling me I was slurring my words. I would jump from one topic to the next, really bad. And then I remember I couldn't stay awake. I was falling asleep every 2 hours. At my desk, falling asleep. My company commander is he's like, First Sergeant, you do not look good. I was like, sir, I don't feel good. I was ashen gray. I was like a dead man walking around. And I was like that for 5 days. And the medic, I'd go to the medics. I'm like, look, I can't think. I can't, it hurts to breathe. Because at this time now, I was trying to I didn't realize how bad the damage inside my chest was. If we were having this conversation, every other word, it would be Gabriel. So I think it was that bad. Yeah. And he thought it was psychosomatic with me. He thought that maybe I got shell shocked. I didn't want to go back out, and I was like, "That's not it, man."
It's probably hard to diagnose that.
It's really, especially since I didn't have any outside indicators. I didn't get punctured by anything. The only thing I had that was kind of a gauge for him was 2 weeks before this. I used to be kind of a little pit bull guy. I did a bench press competition with the Czech soldiers and I beat them. I was like 175 pounds benching 330. Nice. This is ridiculous. And so like I beat them. I like in all these physical events. Well, 2 days after getting blown up like a knucklehead, I'm like, I'm going to go work out. I couldn't pick up 25 pounds. I'm not being hyperbolic. Like I was struggling to pick up 25 pounds.
What was it? That was just.
So it's a complete neurological like breakdown. Like my system.
Yeah. Like your brain's not firing off.
My brain wasn't firing and my system was completely like destroyed. Like so I talked to doctors afterwards and I take this with a grain of salt. A lot of them were like, oh, you should have died. Well, okay. Who knows? Right. Yeah. I didn't. That's all I know. Yeah. But my heart was actually dislodged out of place. It actually almost twisted off. Yeah, it actually got spun. My lungs. So 5 days later, I went to the doc. I was like, you either medevac me or I medevac myself. So he wound up medevacing me after he did some tests, and he actually put water on my heart. He gave me an IV thinking I was dehydrated. Put water on my heart, didn't know it at the time. Again, I can't be mad at him now. He was just doing what he thought was right.
How do you put water on your heart?
But he gave me an IV, and what he didn't know was that I had all kinds of blood build up in my chest. And so all the fluids are going to my chest to try to repair it, to include water. So, yeah. So he gives me an IV. I stand up. I about pass out all over the floor. Well, then I get medevaced out. And when I get the shank, and our technology, our hospitals on the battlefield are amazing. It was like a full operating hospital. They had x-rays. I seen them do surgery on people. Like I watched, because I got stuck in the hospital for 10 days at Shank. And right outside my cop, the engineer company, they got hit again. And one of their females, she got really messed up. Mm-hmm. Like she got ejected from the vehicle, broke her hip, broke like all kinds of bones, fractured her skull. And so I went and saw her at their surgery. And I mean, we're in the middle of Afghanistan. They got a tube in her. They're getting all the infection out. I mean, they reset so much stuff. Like our medical on the battlefield is amazing. Mm-hmm. That's what keeps us alive. Yeah. But yeah, so they did all this workup. My heart was still in distress, so of course it's not trying to, it's got no strength for anything else. So my heart's in distress, my lungs were complete. So the alveoli of your chest, my alveoli 5 days later were still, they showed me the x-ray. My chest looked like broken glass. That's what it looked like. Mm-hmm. Black and white, just all broken. And so they're like, okay, we're going to keep you in a hospital, see if you're good, and then we're going to send you back to the battlefield. And I was like, well, fair enough, but, you know, what's wrong with me? And they couldn't die. They didn't know. Mm. My CKMB levels, which for those watching, they're your heart elevation, like enzymes that when you, okay, the example I know is if you have the Black Widow heart attack, supposedly your CKMB levels will hit like 13 or 15. Mm. And that's your heart's signal to say it's in distress. And it goes into repair mode. Roughly 72 hours later, they're supposed to go back down to 0. Well, after I got blown up 5 days later, I was still like a 7.8 or an 8.0, something like that. I was still like really high. So my heart was in big distress. Come to find out, I actually had a heart attack standing up when I got blown up. Mm-hmm. Sudden impact cardiac arrest is what it's called. So I actually had like a minor heart attack standing up. So after 10 days in the hospital, my CKMB levels plateaued at 5.5. So they couldn't justify sending me back to my company. So they sent me forward to Bagram. Doctors at Bagram were checking my chest. They did an echocardiogram, CT scan, and they still were like, well, we're not exactly what's wrong with you. Because at this time, I didn't know my heart was messed up. I knew I couldn't breathe. That's all I knew. Like I couldn't have a conversation. Mm-hmm. I couldn't breathe. I was trying to figure out what's going on. So I was in Bagram for like a night or two, which was ridiculous because I remember sitting on the couch and I'm like trying to breathe. And this dude's telling me how he's going home because he twisted his ankle playing basketball. And I was like, that sucks.
Yeah.
It's terrible, you know, like get out of here, guy. Like, so they sent me the launch stool, and this is like 2 weeks after I get blown up. I get the launch stool, and now they're finally like admitting me into an actual hospital. They're like, "Oh my God, you're messed up," and I was like, "What's wrong with me?" And they just had I spent one night in the hospital at launch stool. The next day I saw the doctor. I saw the doctor for 5 minutes. That's it. The doctor was like, "You're going home."
Yeah.
I was like, "What are you talking about, man?" He's like, you got like internal damage that we cannot put you back on the battlefield. Like, it's going to take you a long time to recover. Yeah. And so I spent like 3 more days at launch stool in Germany, and I got sent home. The day I left launch stool, and this really hurt me, was the day one of my soldiers got killed. The first soldier in that company got killed. Oh, shit. Ray Ramirez was his name. And fantastic human being. I loved Ray. I'm very good friends with his family. But that was the day that I left to come back to the States, and that's what kind of started the rest of my... I did 2 more tours after that. The 5th tour was like a nothing tour. Like, it's nothing to talk about.
No, I kind of want to stop it there right now. I know it's kind of leaving a cliffhanger there, but because there's so much more that I want to get into, man, and I don't want to rush this. You know what I mean? So I'd love to have you back on. Yeah. We can do this again and finish up this story. And but yeah, man, I mean, your story's crazy, man. Who would have thought some guy I was doing jiu-jitsu with, you know what I mean?
This little guy who just rolls on the mat, came from nowhere, right? Like, this
is the beautiful thing about why I started this podcast, dude. It's like, there's guys out there that are just, they have stories, man. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, and I want to hear them, you know. I think it's interesting. You know, I would have never have known this if I would have just kept, you know, just rolling with you every time I see, but until I talked to you and we actually spoke, and then you heard about, you know, the podcast. I mean, shit, we've been talking for over 3 hours right now.
I know, man.
There's just so much more, you know.
I think it's cool what you're doing too. That's why I was like, man, that's cool. Cause it's one of those, sometimes I question if I actually have a story. Sometimes I'm like, I'm going to write a story.
I think a lot of people think that about themselves, but I think that's natural. You know, like for a long time, like I did one podcast, the first episode, and then I didn't do it for a year. Yeah. Psychologically, you just kind of get a little messy. Like, I don't know if people really want to listen to it. You know, you kind of get mixed up with life and work. And then I think at some point, I was just talking to Jeremy about that, bring that up again. Like he says he does stuff, and then he like such a perfectionist at it, and kind of like, you know, it takes him a while to get it done. And that's the same thing with me. It's like a mixture of trying to make it the best, but then also it's like, does anybody really care? Once you get past like, well, I don't care if they care, because there's so many people out there. I don't have to try to get everyone's attention. Like, I just want people who like what I have to show, and like the show. If they like it, then that's all I care about. Yeah. You know what I mean? And if they don't, at the same time, dude, I'm getting to meet cool ass people like you and other people that have been on the podcast. And we found out we have a lot of things in common. Oh yeah. Today, you know, and I think that's a beautiful thing, man. You know, like we were talking earlier before we started, long form conversation. We're losing that. And podcasts have been a great way to, you know, I know everyone kind of rolls their eyes too on podcasts. Everyone's got a podcast. But they're great, man. I mean, to get to connect with people, because, you know, like I told you, I'm not trying to like be a millionaire off of this, but the cool thing is, what makes me feel like a millionaire is getting to hear cool stories from you guys, meeting new people. Who knows, you know, we may hang out after this, you know, and become good friends, you know, it just through a conversation. Well,
what I think is cool is you're giving people a chance, right? Like, okay, maybe you don't become a millionaire. Yeah. But somebody can hear, and you're giving somebody the chance to hear something.
Like, who knows, man? You might write a book one day. I mean, shit, we've been talking for 3 hours. We barely scratched the surface.
I know, so. I think we hit like question 3. I also can talk a lot, right?
Hey, man, I love it. That's what I want people to come on for. I wish I could do 7-hour podcasts, but I don't want to hold people hostage here. Yeah. And, you know, I also have girls upstairs that are
well, you got. I got mine at the house, so okay.
So they can only go so long. We did a double header today with Jeremy in the morning and then you in the afternoon. So, But yeah, man, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come on.
We're definitely going to have a part 2 here soon.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hit you up on that. And I appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, brother.
Uh-huh.